us humans have done pretty well for ourselves. Every time you think we're on the brink of apocalypse, just remember, previous life forms have had smaller brains and lasted way longer than we have currently. We will adapt and survive just as well as any of Earth's life. For example, to the best of our current scientific understanding, it's hypothesized that the collective history of the dinosaurs, the Mesozoic era, spanned a total of 186 million years. I bring up this scarcely conceivable span because that's not as long as it felt to watch through the Land Before Time series. One classic movie, one enormous franchise, a familiar tale in Hollywood. The big question is, why? Why The Land Before Time? It was a good movie, but not needs 13 sequels good. No movie is. It's one of those cases where the act of watching everything is so long and arduous that it sunk the reputation of the characters and their world as established in that first movie. It's not just, man, that was a good thing, but then they had to ruin it with follow-ups. The Land Before Time is more follow-up than flesh and bone, a bicentennial man made up of DVD disc plastic. That's the pessimistic way of kicking this review off, but I try as hard as I can to get a positive message out of whatever I cover. There had to be something clicking with audiences for them to want this much of it for so many years, almost in a row. And hey, if all the sequels were equally mediocre, that would be more impressive than if there was variation in their quality, so I'm ready for any flavor of quality. As you ought to know, the first Land Before Time, and only the first, was directed by Don Bluth. This wasn't his first movie, so I won't go too in-depth with his background and early Disney career. The long and short of it is, Disney was in a rough state in the late 70s and early 80s, and Don and some of his friends left to pursue their own projects with less corporate interference. With The Secret of Nim and An American Tail, Don would grow to become one of the most well-regarded directors in the 80s animation scene. Heck, one of the best ever. I'm sure you're more familiar with his name than your average Disney director. You would know your Wolfgang Reithermans from your John Muskers if you're a historian, but Don Bluth was successfully able to carve his own path and was rewarded with his own unique legacy larger than the studios he worked with. And for his third movie, those studios were Universal Pictures and Amblin, same as An American Tail, and one of the same producers too, Steven Spielberg. You may have heard of him, now joined with his close friend George Lucas. You might not have heard of him. They would executive produce the movie, but it would also be more closely produced by Bluth's partners, Gary Coleman and John Pomeroy, from a script written by Judy Freudberg and Tony Geiss. Despite Don Bluth leaving Disney to have more creative control of what he was making, The Land Before Time was the first time he thought one of his movies was compromised in the final cut. It was originally longer and had more sequences of violence and destruction, but Spielberg and Lucas wanted it toned back for the final cut. It's believed this deleted footage is gone for good, which is a shame. Despite this, The Land Before Time released on November 18, 1988 to decent reviews and financial success at a precarious time. This was a few months after Who Framed Roger Rabbit and a year before The Little Mermaid. Disney was on the verge of a renaissance, the Disney Renaissance. Whatever your feelings on All Dogs Go to Heaven, this was the last time Don Bluth was truly able to beat Disney to the wider public's hearts. And I think he earned that victory. Most would say this is a better movie than Oliver and Company, and a very good movie in its own right, and I'm inclined to agree.
He knew they would be together, always.
Now, you be careful, my Littlefoot.
At a critical point in Earth's distant past, a famine has swept the land. Food and water are scarce, but the inhabitants of this world, the dinosaurs, find hope in the existence of the Great Valley, a heavenly oasis thousands of steps away where they can live in tranquility. It takes so long for a pack of dinosaurs to get there that a new generation emerges, then gets separated from their parents in various ways, and has to regroup and work together to get to the Great Valley. Alive. This movie is somewhat notorious for its depressing plot. It's not exactly a fun adventure we're going on here. The world looks like, well, functionally is, a wasteland. Children who can just barely problem solve are stuck together, being chased through the wasteland by a T-Rex, or as they call it, a sharp tooth. The 80s was an era of mortal danger for kids in movies. We hope you like and relate to our protagonists. Now watch them escape a grisly fate. The Land Before Time's contribution to this trend is incidental, as Don Bluth was applying more influence from the first few Disney features, but it still evokes a different era of family entertainment, where parent groups were heavily scrutinizing every other form of entertainment for mildly offensive content, but were fine with the near-death experience craze happening on the big screen. Compared to other dark 80s kids movies, The Land Before Time is rather tame, more atmospheric than overwhelmingly grim, and it helps that the characters have a relatable appeal to them. Littlefoot is our main character, a young Apatosaurus, or Longneck as they're called in universe, who goes through the most personal hardship of the kids, losing his mother and never knowing his father. His only hope of seeing any of his family, his grandparents, is to get to the Great Valley. It's remarkable how brave he is despite how much has happened to him. You see a soldier in him, someone who's learning that your loved ones never completely leave you, and that gives him the strength to keep going. If Littlefoot's a mama's boy, then Sarah is daddy's little girl, a triceratops or three-horn, who is easily influenced by her father to be proud to an unreasonable extent. She and Littlefoot butt heads throughout the adventure, as Sarah has to unlearn this prejudice against other species of dinosaurs. I say has to, but whether she does completely is left vague, especially for this adventure. But even so, you can't fault a little kid for being this hot-headed when they're stuck out here. Ducky's gotta be my favourite. She's a Parasaurolophus, or swimmer, who's just happy and innocent and the easiest for this adventure to break, but it doesn't. Littlefoot's the main protagonist and Sarah's got the most ambitious character arc, but Ducky has the most to lose, being so much smaller and more fragile, with her one skill, swimming, not getting much use in such a barren world. And yet she perseveres just like all the rest and accepts them as her friends, and one of them as her family. It's so sweet. These three have very distinct roles portrayed very well by their young voice actors, Gabrielle Damon, Candace Hudson, and Judith Barcy. Wherever she and her mother have gone, I hope they're together and safe. They also run into Spike, a Stegosaurus who doesn't speak but provides support and muscle. He forms a close bond with Ducky to the point that she lets him be adopted as her brother at the end, showing that they were able to become more than friends by the end. Last of the main five is Petrie, a pteranodon or flyer with self-esteem issues. I've put Spike and Petrie together because they've both got physical attributes that help out the gang, and those are their most functional uses to the plot. But there's a little more to Petrie due to the fact that he can express himself more easily, so we know what he's scared of and are happy when he can start to overcome it. Besides them, their families have minor roles in the adventure. That is except for Littlefoot's mother, who starts out as his source of strength and comfort, but after she dies, her voice sticks around as a sort of guardian angel to Littlefoot. I'll go more into this with the themes, but it is very important to the message of the movie that Littlefoot's mother never entirely left him. He's still got some family regardless, some grandparents who are much further ahead in getting to the Great Valley, so that's another good reason for Littlefoot to keep going, to reunite with his remaining family. The others are not so lucky as to have parents that are both loving and well-defined. It's inferred, but not shown. Perhaps with Sarah's dad, not named on screen but listed in the credits as Tops, you don't see any love but tough at this point. On the way, Littlefoot bumps into a grumpy old dinosaur named Ruja who seems harsh at first, but then displays some empathy for Littlefoot and his situation. It's a very small part to play in this movie, but it does a lot to brighten things up and make the journey more optimistic. But keeping some peril in the movie is Sharptooth, a T-Rex who doesn't speak, doesn't negotiate, only hunts for whatever other dinosaurs it can. Doesn't matter if they're fully grown or a child. They're a real threat to all our characters, and you can't say it's just a stupid dinosaur who doesn't know what it's doing. You get the sense it definitely does and takes satisfaction in the violence it inflicts. A simple villain? Yes, but very impactful on the tail.
No green foods here, and I still hungry.
I'm still hungry too.
The enduring legacy of The Land Before Time is being an emotional rollercoaster to its young, impressionable audience. It sucks you into a dangerous world where the barriers of comfort are suddenly done away with. The sad moments are very sad, the angry moments are very angry, the scary moments are very scary. For a kid, of course. But if you're a jaded adult with a heart of stone and this movie still gets to you, I wouldn't find that surprising. If you strip away the animation and setting, this is a story about a child who's lost his mother and has to make it through a never-ending desert just to reach civilization. It's hard not to give the characters your empathy, especially when they're children going through struggles that some young adults don't face. These are some of the hardest moments of life presented through the eyes of a child. They're never given ages, but they're coded to be about 5 or 6. They aren't old enough to understand the full gravity of the situation, but they are building coping mechanisms, like Littlefoot's faith in his mother and Sarah's overwhelming pride. They are reflections of their parents, and to an extent, the generations of dinosaurs that preceded them. There's a minor reflection motif in the visual language of the movie, and I had to figure out what it was saying about the journey. On a more base level, working together being good is a more simple and digestible message from the movie. These 5 characters are very different in personality and physical attributes, but whether they're nice or mean or sturdy or lean, they know what they want, will apply some teamwork, and potentially bond over a shared experience by the end. A lot of kids and family movies have this positive, easy to grasp message in them, but The Land Before Time does it by packing a wallop. It's sad and frightening, but never alienating. That's why I'll say it's healthy and appropriate for kids to be confronted with some stories this desolate, because it makes them appreciate what they have, and it prepares them for life when done with balance. I discussed a similar point in my Cat Dog review, but in regards to that show's overall mean tone, I came to a divided conclusion that how it worked there was dependent on the viewer's lived experience. But the difference with The Land Before Time is that it's more about persevering through hard times and recognizing the connections you have in this tough world. At least it's a beautifully rendered world, it's animation talking time, and Don Bluth's work is known for its high quality, so you know it's not going to disappoint. The different species move in distinct and appealing ways and strike a strong balance of being cute, but not so cute you forget they're dinosaurs. Mostly focusing on little kids helps get that across. The environment they travel through will stick with you as much as them. It's humid, uncanny, uninviting. A lot of greys, oranges, and browns in the color palette. That's what you get from the bulk of the movie at least. But other periods of the adventure with different moods and plot beats are given a wise selection of colors and lights as well. They paint a picture of a different world, our world as it was eons ago. But it wasn't without its peak moments. Peak, but not all fun to get through. Littlefoot's mother battling the Sharptooth and then dying is tremendous. It's Bambi's mother for a new generation. But what's bittersweet is Littlefoot gets to have one last talk with his mother, highlighting their special connection that will permeate through the rest of the journey. The part soon after where Littlefoot bumps into Ruda, the grumpy old dinosaur, is also a highlight for me. It would have been so easy for them to make him a complete grouch and rub in that life's not fair, but they allowed this dinosaur to feel sorry for Littlefoot and impart some wisdom to him that makes the message of the movie infinitely clearer. The scene of the gang working together to reach some tree stars high up in a rare tree is great too. It shows off what their individual strengths can be, and in the right way, as they all have a simple shared goal: get food. And the best scene of all, in my view, is when they finally get to the Great Valley and reunite with their families, and for a moment, each other. It feels very different from the rest of the movie, more innocent and optimistic. Like even when we see them playing earlier, there's an air of doubt, but now, they're at the other end of a torturous experience. They can be kids. Sweetening the deal is the ending song, If We Hold On Together, sung by Ross the Boss. This is considered the theme song for the franchise, and it ties into everything the characters went through here. Picking least favorite scenes was hard, and I could only come up with one I'm not that big on. I guess the first leg of the opening narration's a bit slow. I don't think it's a rip-off of Fantasia's Rite of Spring if that's what you're worried about. It's good for establishing the setting, but I care a lot about the characters enough to where this long, characterless portion of the movie isn't up there for me. I don't have much of a problem with Sarah being rude all the time. It doesn't drag down my experience with the movie, because in totality, it kind of adds to the suspense and payoff when they finally get to the Great Valley and stop fighting. When you consider the sequels keep her being rude for a long time to come, it does kind of retroactively make the lack of a full character arc here unsatisfying, but that's all the sequels' problem, not the originals. I'll say again, I found it hard to find moments I'd call the worst, or even lulls. It's a short movie, the shortest of the franchise, so little time is wasted and everything it wants to say is compact and concise. It wasn't designed to be this short, but it's a very good watch just the same. If you've got 70 minutes to spare and want an emotional roller coaster, you could either watch The Land Before Time, or think about the sequels. One of the most divisive things about Don Bluth's body of work is its sequels. Those he had input on are agreed to have their charm, but those without his involvement are lambasted as lazy cash grabs. His more acclaimed 80s movies getting follow-ups pumped out while his 90s output was wavering in quality was something Don couldn't foresee with his Mormon superpowers. But even with the mixed quality of this, and this, The Land Before Time got hit by the sequel bug the baddest of all beginning in 1994. I don't think Universal were waiting in the wings for 6 years, finally crafting the perfect continuation. The early to mid 90s were dominated by dinosaur media. Why? I can't begin to guess. You could say Jurassic Park had something to do with it, but that came in the middle of the craze. But there was now market interest in dinosaurs, and Universal now had a popular movie about dinosaurs they could milk fossilized bone dry. 2 actually. Releasing on Laserdisc on December 23rd, 1994 and VHS the following Boxing Day, The Land Before Time 2, The Great Valley Adventure, marked Roy Allen Smith's first directorial effort for the series. He would go on to direct for Family Guy, so safe hands, right? It had the most writers of any film in the series, with 3 contributing to the screenplay. A fresh slate of talent, with only 1 returning voice actor, Candace Hudson. This shake-up is apparent from the word go. Effort is made to recapture the epic qualities of the original, but it's gonna be less than the sum of its parts.
Have fun.
Thanks.
The valley is a wonderful place to grow up.
What happened to Littlefoot and the gang after they got to the Great Valley? They found an excuse to leave. After getting into a dangerous mess and lectured by their folks to stay put, they planned to test their bravery and independence by journeying to the mysterious beyond, roundabout where they almost died the last time, so yippee! It's by a stroke of luck they get to be heroes, saving an egg from 2 egg-napping Struthiomimuses. But what are they to do when it hatches into a sharp tooth? There's a couple of good ideas in here, but it comes down to the execution. The new characters include the hatched T-Rex, Chomper, who as far as T-Rexes go, is pretty darn cute. He's got the same big eyes as the Leaf Eaters, unlike the other sharp teeth, and once he gets a taste of friendship, he can't go without it. As far as babies go, Chomper's adequate, he impacts the story. The villainous egg nappers, Ozzy and Strut, aren't as scary as fully grown sharp teeth, but they still have menace going for them, especially the relatively competent one, Ozzy. This may be a lighter movie than the first, but the villains are still okay with kidnapping children, so threat levels are still high. The kids' parents are given proper introductions here. Petrie's mother's got a lot on her plate and doing a good job mothering everyone. Ducky and Spike's mother is also kind, and Sarah's dad is the opposite. Still brutish and stubborn and not the best influence on his daughter. To give the cast of grown-ups more nuance, Littlefoot's grandparents are solidified as his protective and kind guardians, imparting wisdom if he's having trouble with something. You will see over the course of the series, they're the most intelligent adults in the Great Valley, which isn't a very hard bar to clear. There isn't much to say about how the main group are holding up individually. They don't seem too hung up on the events of the first movie, they're just trying to enjoy their childhoods now. Not that it would be a fun movie if they spent it on 70 minutes of therapy sessions. They've still got some of the same character flaws, like Sarah's still stubborn and Petrie's still shy, but you can't expect little kids to be free of things to learn about themselves.
Friendly, aren't you?
The big and rather infamous deal with The Land Before Time 2 and the other 12 sequels is that they're much softer in tone than the classic original, that hit a striking balance between darkness and lightness that's kept it fondly remembered. The sequels are on the fluffier side, with the adventures rapidly decreasing in stakes as they go on. Being the first sequel, the Great Valley Adventure isn't too far gone. There's still clear and present dangers to contend with, the Eggnappers have a few sinister plans, and when grown-up Sharpteeth appear, they appear with deserved seriousness. They understood what the original was going for, but are also crafting a new direction. A not as strong direction, but I'm guessing there were restrictions on direct-to-video content that theatrical movies don't have. The film revolves around the hatching of Chomper. The first act builds up to it, and the others build off it. There's a nice sentiment that just because this baby comes from a feared lineage doesn't mean he's a lost cause. He can still be taught to play friendly. They don't do anything too original with how he's treated. Skepticism, then acceptance, then something goes wrong, but they come back together again and leave on friendly terms. It sounds like I stripped down a common type of plot progression, but that's all I got out of it here, besides what it means for dinosaurs, that Sharpteeth are able to be befriended. I can't avoid the fact that the musical numbers kick off here. While the first movie had one major song for the credits, we now have 3 per movie sung by the characters. Here they're all performed by an outside band, the Roaches, but everything after this is done by internal music teams, and they are as simple as they come. Peaceful Valley is the most just there song, setting the tone for how good it feels to live in the Great Valley. The Egg song is the villain's song, which is sung well, but the music and lyrics are kinda dorky. The Chomper song feels like the biggest showcase, with them all accepting Chomper, briefly before the plot gets going. Before that, I'd say it's the best song of this movie, which isn't the highest bar to clear, but it's something. I'll only bring up the animation when there's some kind of tech advancement, change in production companies, or shift in the series' direction, so the second, third, and fourth movies will all be lumped together for this segment. They're Royale and Smith productions, hand-painted on cells and outsourced to ACOM. The direction is fine, but the clearly TV tier budget isn't reassuring. These are the worst looking movies of the whole series. Not awful, but pretty bland and stiff directly compared to the original. It looks on par with an animated TV series, which makes me wonder why they didn't just make a show this early on. But we'll get to the eventual show in due time. I can give credit for them keeping the color palette raw and earthy, not as much as the first one, but for a lighter set of sequels, of course it should look lighter. For me, the best moments of this movie are Chomper saving Littlefoot not once, but twice. Once from his own parents, then again from the Eggnappers. It seems however Littlefoot and the rest imprinted on him, the outcome was positive, and he'll still be able to live a sharp-toothy life afterward, just with more of a conscience. The worst moment of the movie for me is the end of the Chomper song. Chomper bites Sarah and suddenly he's not as accepted by them again. Man, does it not hide how uninspired the plot swerve is. You could have had them teach him not to bite people, but that would make it so we wouldn't have this breakup and reunion. But do they need this breakup and reunion? I'm not sure. I could only think of a few especially good moments and one especially bad moment, because the Great Valley Adventure is so average. My verdict is meh. I don't like it, but I don't hate it. If this was the only sequel, it would be more significant and fondly remembered as something for Land Before Time fans in the mid-90s to chew on. But as the series goes on, it's going to get harder for the follow-ups to justify themselves.
When you're all grown up, you won't be very big at all. When we grow up, we'll be much bigger.
Oh yeah? Well, I'm gonna see to it that you never grow up.
In The Land Before Time 3, The Time of the Great Giving, our heroes are regularly being taunted by 3 older kids in the Great Valley, Hip, Mutt, and Nod. Their scientific names are these. I didn't get prehistoric zoologist on my autism bingo card, so I'll just put the names on screen from now on and save us from some of my classic mispronunciations. So anyway, as they're getting bullies, meteorites start landing nearby in the mysterious beyond, causing water to stop flowing into the Great Valley. As its population has to ration the water and infighting over it rises, Littlefoot and his gang go on an adventure to find water themselves. Unluckily for them, a wildfire overtakes the final act of the movie, and their adventure gets more fiery than watery for a bit there. You get some sharp-toothed velociraptors near the end, but this is a dino versus nature story with an overarching lesson that sharing is good and bullying is bad. The new characters for this movie are the bullies, Hip, Mutt and Nod. They partake in pretty basic schoolyard taunting at first, but hoarding a waterhole for themselves is right around the overboard zone, so there's a reason they have to learn to share after this scene. Hip is their leader and probably my favourite of the trio, but that's a small favourite because they all play stock roles of either leader, crony or dumb crony, and Hip's playing leader. As I said, there's also velociraptors near the end as this movie's sharp teeth, which makes for a contrast to the T-Rexes of the past. They're faster and more agile, making confrontations with them harder to simply run away from. The old characters stay about the same as the last go, with a few exceptions. Tops, with how authoritative he gets over the remaining water, is cemented as the meanest and most brutish recurring character in these movies. It had to be someone, I guess. Littlefoot and Sarah are getting along just a little bit better. There's still some bickering, but now that they've got actual bullies, they share more common ground. Spike and Petrie are still hanging around because they were in the first two movies. Ducky, the swimmer, doesn't have much to do in this movie all about water. Missed opportunity there. For this movie, the dynamic between the kids and adults is starting to remind me of a show about toddlers, in that the adults are dealing with their own big boy problems, and the kids have a tenuous grasp of what exactly they're feeling. The communication barrier isn't as wide as in, say, Rugrats, but this is still preparing the very young audience for the realization that their parents have their own lives to live. I'm not saying this makes the movie seem infantile, not too infantile anyway, but it fits with the much simpler message they have to deliver here, that sharing is indeed caring. The problem the meteorite causes the Great Valley, rationing the water, can be solved if they were more rational with the rationing. I know it would be hard to keep a clear head during a drought with water running out, but some of them aren't putting their best foot forward, especially not Tops. There's a kernel of a message here that even adults can struggle with such basic life lessons when the going gets tough, so there's that. A little more obvious is what the bullies learn, to pick on someone their own size. Well, really, it's not to pick on anyone. Pretty basic arc they're thrust into, and it works in tandem with the sharing lesson if you really think it's worth keeping. But neither Tops or any of the bullies are the villain of the movie. The velociraptors aren't even, they're more of an obstacle. The main villain here is nature. I hope the effects animators were paid extra for this one. All this threat of natural disaster doesn't make the Great Valley the utopia it was promised to be in the first movie, but the fact it's still undeniably the safest place in the world for them in this era is a harsh thought. I'll say when I think the franchise has officially sanded off too much of its initial edge, but it's not yet. The plot and its themes are much less poignant, but if you get your kicks out of dinosaur kids almost dying, then you're still in the right place. All the sequels are way more bright and child-friendly than they're not, but the shift so far has been very gradual, movie by movie. There's another trio of songs and they don't help this perception. The first song, When You're Big, is this odd number the bullies sing about how big and mean they are with big band instrumentals. It's a song I'm not into, but it's gotten a pretty beefy analysis. According to Wikipedia, Slovenian philosopher Slavoj Zizek wrote that it propagated hegemonic liberal multiculturalist ideology, and got this out of it. You can't see it, but I'm pointing a finger at my head and twirling it around. Standing Tough is Top's big rock song where he sounds like your least favorite rock star in their retirement years. Good instrumentals, bad singing and lyrics. The best song in this movie is Kids Like Us, a softer piece Littlefoot sings to reassure himself and his friends that the grown-ups are just as scared of the drought as they are. But it's not my favourite moment in this movie overall. That honour would go to the meteorite coming down so soon after the opening. It sets the scene for a movie with a bigger scale than its direct predecessor, something with more at stake and more surprises. You don't get that sense by the time of my least favorite scenes, which are any time we're stuck with the grown-ups bickering about the water rations. It all feels like biding time. You can establish this discord in a few seconds, not multiple scenes. To tell you the truth, I don't know what those scenes could be better spent on. More adventuring, developing the bullies, setting up the velociraptors. There's a lot the Time of the Great Giving could do, but it's made more of a commitment to its lesson than the context surrounding its lesson. It's another one that's middle of the road. I'd rank it below the second, but like the second, it's watchable and might have the same thrill to it for the young and impressionable. The highest rating I'm willing to give it is 7.8, not enough water. The Land Before Time 4, Journey Through the Mists, appears to have been produced concurrently with The Time of the Great Giving. It has the same 1995 copyright date, despite being released in December 1996, and I've heard that this was going to be the third one released, but then they got swapped around. The only evidence I can find is the third one script originally being counted as the fourth, which is good enough for me, it's in writing. Speaking of, Dev Ross, who contributed to the second, was the sole writer for the third and fourth. She'd take a break from the series after this, and Roy Allen Smith would quit directing them entirely after Journey Through the Mists. This would also mark the final performances in the series for Candace Hudson as Sarah, and Linda Gary as Grandma Longneck, who passed away during production. The end of an era in real life, but a fresh start for the characters.
My herd has roamed far and wide, and everywhere things are changing.
Changing? How?
A herd of Longnecks comes over to the Great Valley during a migration, bringing along with them a kid Littlefoot's age named Allie. He gets torn between his old friends and Allie, and his struggles only seem to multiply when he learns his grandpa is sick, and only the Golden Nightflower has a chance of curing him. There's just one catch. The Golden Nightflower only grows in the place the Longnecks just migrated out of before becoming too dangerous. Ah shucks, looks like the kids are going on an adventure again. Noticing a pattern? So far, all the sequels have hinged on getting out of the Great Valley to go on some big adventure. All they do is change the reason for why they leave, to prove their bravery and independence, to find water, to find a remedy for an illness. This time, it's at least for a more noble and personal cause than usual. New characters for this picture include Ellie, Littlefoot's new friend, who's a little like a more blunt version of Sarah, prejudiced against other species, but she's more upfront about it. The difference is she becomes a lot nicer a lot faster when it comes time to ask the others for help. It's easier to forgive her when you learn that she's still learning how to interact with others. The old one is the oldest Longneck to come from the migration and is a sage figure, delivering exposition with authority and wisdom. Her biggest role in the story is to tell Littlefoot that going to the Land of the Mists is simply too dangerous. He goes anyway. Another ally is Archie, an old prehistoric turtle who Littlefoot meets when stuck in a cave. He helps him to dig his way into a new area, and that's one of his only uses other than telling the kids to stick together. He doesn't do much for me or the progression of the story. They later meet a rodent that Ducky names Tickles, a cute little thing who does cute little things. And it's super ironic how this is supposed to be the most adorable thing to them, but it looks pretty ugly compared to them. Not my cup of tea, but I can see why some viewers would find him to be a nice change of pace. The villains this time around are Icky and Dial, a prehistoric bird and crocodile, the latter nearsighted, who would be more effective hunters if they didn't bicker all the time. Easily my least favorite villains of the franchise so far. It's hard to take them seriously as a threat when they're like this, and I get that's the joke, but that makes them feel more like joke villains. Including the Plesiosaur who chases Dial at the end, there's about 7 new characters, quite a big number compared to 3. Not all of them are good, but they add up to creating a more robust journey. For the old characters this time, there's only 3 that I can say are going through very slow changes. Littlefoot learns a little more about his family and lineage, and is ready to introduce outsiders to concepts such as friendship and tolerance. Sarah seems to like Littlefoot more than in earlier films, to the point that she's the most resistant to the wrench Ellie threatens to push into their dynamic. And this is the movie where Spike learns to speak. He was unvoiced during the first movie, and Rob Paulsen has been making grunting noises during the sequels, and you're gonna have to wait to hear anything more out of him.
Yeah, that's using your tail. Ah! Watch it!
Despite having the biggest cast yet, Journey Through the Mists is confident in being a more personal, character-driven affair. There's something personal at stake for Littlefoot, and he's gonna motivate our fellow young Longneck to be more accepting of his friends. It's still a self-contained adventure with little long-term character development being planned out, but good on the creative team for making us want to care more about Littlefoot and co on this journey. The new location they go to, the Land of Mists, is one of the most unique so far.
Double rainbow, oh my god.
It's much further out and holds its own surprises that the Great Valley and surrounding area didn't. It also has caves. A good chunk of the second act here is set in caves, but later they go to forests and rivers. It's like the movie is rewarding you for watching it by gradually expanding the scope of the land, which I shouldn't be praising to high heavens, but I was really worried this was going to be mostly dark caves and old married couples. The message of this movie is work together, which is a bit underwhelming because that was part of what they learned during the events of the first movie, but whatever. They hammer it in differently here, by which I mean it's way more forceful. The villains only ever fail because they can never work together, and we all know that in kids' movies, villains are supposed to represent what the director doesn't want the young, impressionable audience to be like. Not everything this movie does is different. Some of its themes and material harken back to the first movie, like the threat of losing a family member, although in this case, the outcome is far rosier. One big change from the norm is the climax. It's another action-packed escape from predators, but now it's in an ocean setting, befitting the villains. What I'm saying is that it's doing things just differently enough to make a new story, but doesn't want to break from any self-imposed formulas or patterns. Another 3 songs? Another 3 songs. Grandma's Lullaby is good. It feels like a Disney song, which I suppose isn't the best thing to make this franchise look distinct, but it's still a soothing song with some emotional undertones given its context within the movie. Grandma preparing Littlefoot for the worst outcome. Who Needs You is trash. Icky and Dial haven't got singing voices, but the movie thinks they do, and their musical number drags on way too long. It's the worst part of any of these movies so far. The annoyance overrides a breach in the suspension of disbelief.
I need you like a cold in July.
How do they have a concept of the month of July? In the middle is It Takes All Sorts, which is a cute song with Allie and the gang singing about how great it is that multiple types of people exist. Optimistic and also triumphant, coming later on in the movie after new friendships are solidified. For the best and worst moment of the movie, I'm lucky I don't have to elaborate because they're Grandma's Lullaby and Who Needs You respectively. I'm home free and ready to give my verdict on Journey Through the Mists.
Meh.
It's just as mid as the last 2. I would say it's better than 3 on account of having more things going on and a greater sense of pathos. I suppose the best word for the Roy Allen Smith era is consistent. But now, we move on to an 8-movie streak directed by Charles Grosvenor, a Hanna-Barbera veteran who just started directing animated movies. Anyone ever hear of Once Upon a Forest? Put your hand down if you've only seen the Nostalgia Critic review. Screenwriter is John Loy of Smurfs fame, who'll also write most of the rest of them. For the 4th December in a row, a Land Before Time sequel hit VHS and Laserdisc, and even though what little magic there was in a new installment had worn off, it seemed like there was fresh blood pumping and ready to leave its mark. Even most of the voice actors are different, but the voice acting is as okay as usual. They're talented folks, they say their lines well, and it doesn't get in the way of the story.
This is so stupid. Why do we have to walk like this? We want them to follow us, don't we? So we gotta leave good tracks.
You know the drill by now. Space, the start of Earth, narrator setting the scene, dinosaurs are awesome. What gets the kids to want to leave now? Well, actually, this time, everyone is driven out of the Great Valley and surrounding area by a swarm of locusts, or as they call them, leaf gobblers, devouring all the food. The dinosaur families are planning to split up and go their separate ways, but remembering the moral of the last movie, Littlefoot gets his gang to stick together by sneaking off in the middle of the night without their parents knowing. They then cross a path in the middle of the ocean to a mysterious island where they meet Chomper. Hey cool, Chomper's back! Just a shame a tsunami hit, eroding the path they took to get there, and now they're stranded. The mysterious island is more about the adventure again than the characters. I don't mean that as a completely bad thing, even if I prefer the approach of Journey Through the Mists a little more on paper. But it was time for a back-to-basics approach. The world needed to be expanded if the series was to continue. The irony of this is the movie barely introduces any new characters. Most of the new faces are the threats, including the locusts, a Gigantosaurus sharptooth, a pterodactyl sharptooth, and a swimming sharptooth. The locusts are pretty boring characters if you try to place them under any definition, and the other sharptooth offer the same sense of threat as before, but numbed significantly by the fact this is so far into the series. The one new, sentient, friendly character introduced here is Elise, another plesiosaur who only appears in the climax to save the day and get the gang back home. She's nice, but could have had a bigger part in the movie beforehand to make her role more impactful. The benefit here is that the pre-established cast is given more time for themselves. Littlefoot and Sarah have their first big tiffs since the second movie, spurred again by their families disagreeing on something and arguing over whether it's still safe to be around Chomper. But they still put their differences aside and keep adventuring because they really need some food. If you want to know why I hardly bring up Ducky, Petrie, and Spike in these old character checkups, that's because they've had minimal impact on the stories so far. They're still around to be friendly and reaffirm the bond they've all shared since the first movie, but it's getting underwhelming how they aren't being properly utilized. The grown-ups aren't changing under this new direction. Grandpa and Top still argue, the others are still tertiary if they're lucky, but back to the kids, Chomper's reintroduction at the 40-minute mark was a surprise, / could have been if he wasn't on the cover art. Now that he's older and can talk, it's easier to glean a personality and characteristics from him. He's polite and respectful of his old friends, but can bravely stand up for them against his meat-eating parents, themselves reintroduced. Chomper reaffirms the tone of the movie as more cutesy than its predecessors, now that he's gotten a few grown-up sharpteeth to befriend the gang. You could say this defangs the world a little, but I say this is the cast making a positive change to it. I could also say I wouldn't go through the same change of mind as Sarah and remain skeptical of anyone who wanted me on their menu.
So, you like it here? It's okay. Not much to eat. Till now.
With the big hook of this movie being the return of Chomper, it feels like a sequel that follows on from a previous adventure instead of starting a new one over like the last two did. It doesn't disguise the stagnation these movies are already going through though. The formula is very predictable now. What's it saying about friendship? That friends are good and can be with you forever. It's nice to see a reunion between old friends, old 6-year-old friends, but we can't learn much new about them because they're so young and we've seen them go through this same structured story already. What's it saying about parents and guardians? That they just don't understand us rad 90s kids. You know the part in The Lion King where Simba and Nala go to the elephant graveyard against Mufasa's warnings and are cornered by the hyenas? If you want to watch the Land Before Time sequels, you better love watching through that over and over again, but with dinosaurs and parents who are incapable of rescuing them. What's it saying about the world of dinosaurs? It's pretty big. And they're pretty big. This is still a world where survival isn't guaranteed. I think it was a clever idea to make the Great Valley uninhabitable this time. It relinquishes the cast's safety net and makes them more desperate for basic necessities again. When I said earlier this movie was more about the adventure, that can be a positive thing. This one has just as many set pieces as usual, but the emphasis on survival makes it one of the more interesting sequels to the original so far. But the songs are the same as ever, generally passable. Big Water is my favourite, deceptively catchy, and it's accompanied by cool visuals for the creepy undersea creatures. Ducky and Petrie getting the song going by not wanting to cross the big water is their biggest role in the movie. I'm savouring that. Always There is the sappy We Miss Our Parents song. It's fine except for the wonky harmonies in the chorus. Friends for Dinner has good wordplay in the title, but it's a very simple children's song, like if the Wiggles sung about cannibalism. As the second change of direction for the franchise, the animation's gone through minimal changes at this point, but it has started to develop a brighter presentation to complement the thematically brighter tone they keep going in. One innovation is the opening space shots using CGI for the first time. It's pretty simple, even for a direct-to-video production from 1997, but it's a step towards a digital dino world. Other than that, this movie and the next one belong to the next era of The Land Before Time animation-wise. Late-stage cell animation that's getting friendlier, and dare I say, less prehistoric. My favourite moment from the mysterious island is whenever we see what Chompa's parents are saying. For being from the same species as the guy who killed Littlefoot's mother and almost devoured him and 4 other kids, their dialogue is hilariously mundane. A close second is this part.
I don't want to live with a bunch of 3-horns. They're too bossy.
It's an alright character moment, but Littlefoot conveys it so awkwardly, it's funny. The worst part this time is when Chompa tells them to stick with him so they don't get lost. Ducky then splits from the group, wanders away, and falls off a cliff. I'm making this sound like a comedy moment, but it's not. It gets us to a side tangent of Ducky getting taken by a pterodactylus that then ends abruptly. Why is this here? I know why the mysterious island is here. To give you your annual fix. The sequels have been getting slightly better in the rankings, but I should stress they've all been pretty close in quality. That's going to change soon. Positive or negative, I'm ready for anything. Say hello to a VHS exclusive at the time of release. Laserdisc support was ending and the DVD market wasn't big yet. And if that doesn't reflect this installment's fuzzy quality, I'm gonna save you all some anticipation. The Land Before Time 6, The Secret of Saurus Rock, is the first one I think is downright bad. 2 through 5 are sloppy in places, but with direct-to-video sequels in general, you know what you're getting yourself into. But what we've got here is the closest case yet of a 22-minute TV show plot stretched out and called a movie.
It's you. I mean, you're here. I mean, who are you?
Name's Doc.
Grandpa Longneck tells Littlefoot and his friends the legend of the lone dinosaur, a Longneck who defeated a Sharptooth and left with a scar. Who does this remind us of? The part where a monolith in his name, Saurus Rock, emerges from the ground in an electric glow is the more unique part of this tale. Coincidentally, the next day, while playing Lone Dinosaur, Littlefoot is saved by an elderly Longneck with a scar on its face. Sarah's dumb twin niece and nephew Dana and Dinah then go and explore Saurus Rock and get it broken, and just like that, unfortunate happenings begin to occur all over the Great Valley. Is this bad luck, superstition, or a way to inject stakes into a story that needs them? It's a story that has more new characters than the last. The so-called lone dinosaur himself, Doc, is treated like an enigma by the kids and a weird drifter by the grown-ups. But what's funny is, he's just a guy. He's got a basic personality, honest and caring yet closed off, but the legend surrounding him is more fascinating than anything he ever does by himself. I guess that's the point. Dana and Dinah are Sarah's niece and nephew, from which side of her family we never learn, who just wander around playing and getting into trouble. I don't like them one bit. They're annoying, don't add anything to the movie, and pretty much never show up again. The most you get is a cameo in the 10th movie. I get they're toddlers and the movie is testing if Sarah can handle the responsibility of looking after them, but what good is that if they're one-off characters? I'm asking. There's another group of new sharp teeth for our heroes to run away from then beat. A big dangerous one and another big dangerous one. They're different species, but you look at them and get the sense they're a step back creatively from what was delivered in 5. It's like the regular grind and isn't hiding it. As for what the old characters are doing and learning, not a whole lot. Littlefoot has to learn to think critically about the myths and legends he's told. He never gets a direct confirmation that Doc is the lone dinosaur, but he does end up not believing in bad luck, even after everything that happens. Sarah has to learn to watch her niece and nephew more carefully, but this is a one-time thing, so inessential. Ducky, Petrie, and Spike continue their important roles of being Ducky, Petrie, and Spike. Grandpa Longneck has a bigger role than ever before, giving Littlefoot advice and guidance more regularly. Considering he kicked the story off by telling Littlefoot a story he becomes obsessed with, that only makes sense. It's also validating for his character to see him involved in the climax. The other grown-ups are skeptical of Doc's presence causing the bad luck, blaming him because they don't yet know that Saurus Rock is broken. At the absolute least, it gives them a role in the story, and Tops's antisocial behaviour is a little more justified and influential, so if most of the characters have sensical roles to play, Why do I dislike this one so much more than the others so far?
We're going that way.
Simply put, it's boring. The story has promise, but they weren't able to keep it going for 75 minutes in a way that retained my attention. I could see this being an episode of a TV show, but as a movie, the pace is slow. More minutes pass between plot beats than necessary, to the point that even putting the movie on double speed and adding stimulating videos around it doesn't fix the problem. As you'll notice, nothing's happening! I didn't like how this boded for the rest of the franchise when this is just before the halfway mark and they already can't seem to come up with ideas fit for features. What's disappointing is that you can definitely make a story this long about stories and legends and superstition and keep it engaging the whole way through. They could have tested Littlefoot's belief in the lone dinosaur legend more, had a more balanced debate about all the bad luck happening, explored exactly whether Doc is the lone dinosaur or not, and why he doesn't love being associated with that legend. We don't get much of that here, just hero worship and a string of bad coincidences that's brushed off in the end as a string of bad coincidences. I personally don't think bad luck is a tangible thing, but these dinosaurs might with just how much their lives have been threatened recently. Tops only noticed the Great Valley gets a lot of bad luck after Doc strolled in? Sounds like Tops. One trend that's been bucked is they mostly stay within the confines of the Great Valley this time. I wonder if this was a test to see if they could make a movie where they don't have to leave. They still wander off to dangerous places without their parents knowing, but at this point, the illusion of the Great Valley being this safe haven has dissolved. It's only a little less dangerous than the rest of the world. What's staying the same is the songs being mostly okay, maybe with one weak link. The Legend of the Lone Dinosaur is a country song where Littlefoot further embellishes the story. It's catchy and my favorite song of the movie, but they could have found a different place for all the kids hitting each other and laughing about it, which occasionally seeps into this era. Bad Luck has some very juvenile lyrics about literally anything being bad luck, but the positives are it has a fun, jazzy instrumental, and Spike providing backup is fun. On Your Own is Littlefoot's solo song about the pros and cons of going on his own back to Saurus Rock. It's fine, somewhere in the middle, just the token sentimental song these movies have had since the third. I'm pretty cool on the songs this time. They perk up the energy when they get going, which, trust me, this movie needed energy. But my favorite moment of this movie is one of the more careful moments. That being Littlefoot sneaking down to an unconscious Sharptooth to get one of its teeth to repair Saurus Rock. Pretty strange plan, pretty dangerous, and pretty engrossing. It somehow captures some of that life or death suspense from the first two movies. Worst moment by far is Dana and Dinah breaking Saurus Rock. It takes forever to happen for one thing, and another is it's just surprising and annoying that this was their big major use in the story, to break a legendary monolith. Again, I won't go too hard on them because they're babies, but what a way to keep this plot point fresh in my mind all throughout this review. So to wrap up The Land Before Time 6, I can't see why this is the one American Dad name dropped.
Jeff kind of likes to watch the same movie over and over, so right now most nights we're watching The Land Before Time, The Secret of Saurus Rock.
Pure have it on in the background kind of movie, even for small children. If I can squeeze in one last point against it, this is the only sequel Rob Paulsen didn't lend his voice to. That's just not fair on it. But now, you're allowed to take a break. You're lucky. This was the last Land Before Time movie to be released in the 90s, as the next one wouldn't hit stores until the end of 2000, leaving a 2-year gap between 6 and 7. What's so funny? You weren't out of luck to get your Land Before Time fix in the gap though, because remember, this was a big franchise now that it was making hundreds of millions of dollars in sales. There was more Land Before Time merchandise to collect, Land Before Time sing-along tapes to sing to, and after you become a gamer with Land Before Time video games, you can act out your relationship troubles with Land Before Time toys. But when the Land Before Time 7, The Stone of Cold Fire, finally hit VHS and, for the first time, DVD, was the excruciating wait worth it?
Petrie, I'm heartbroken. Don't you recognize your dear old uncle?
Toronto!
If you were a big fan of Petrie, it would have been ecstasy. The story centers around him and a member of his family that's been disgraced, Uncle Tyranno. A while back, he got a herd endangered while leading them to the Great Valley, and has been sentenced to life in exile since. Tyranno is able to reunite with Petrie, however, just as he gains interest in a comet Littlefoot observed one night. And guess who else has come to the valley? Aliens! These rainbow faces, as they're called, show up one day, encouraging Littlefoot to stay curious about the world outside his little bubble. Most people focus on the big reveal at the end that they come from outer space. It's such a random moment that those less inclined to watch the sequels will look at this, declare they jumped the shark, and not dive any further. And that's not fair on the rest of the installment, because there's more going on. The villain, Tyranno, was okay. A flawed villain who lost the respect and trust of the community and turned to a life of petty scheming. He's like the opposite of Doc, a legend in how much of a screw-up he was. He's fleshed out, but not exactly redeemed, keeping it clear that what he does is not aspirational. His cronies, Rinkus and Sierra, sure are cronies. Look at how much they crone. They're definitely on the generic side of things, though they have a place in the story, having manipulated Tyranno away from more sensible plans for redemption. I think I prefer Sierra's design and voice over Rinkus's, but that's splitting fossilized hairs. Some more heroic new characters in the story are the Rainbow Faces, who are just confusing. They don't have names or clear backstories, they simply beam down at random points to motivate Littlefoot for being smart and asking questions about the world, especially about the comet that's recently landed in the general area of the Great Valley. The only reason I can fathom they're in the movie is that there was no way they were able to make a movie at this point without Littlefoot having a lead role, so I guess making his role as weird as possible was a way to keep things fresh. But even with that, I find Petrie to have the most notable and engaging story arc of the main five this time. Sure, he's accruing lifelong trust issues from a deadbeat uncle, but he'll learn to put his faith back in his friends and those who won't use him. Littlefoot, Sarah, and Ducky have a part to play in convincing him of that, while Spike is getting pretty good at pinecone bowling. As for the recurring grown-up characters, they exist to be fearful and ashamed of Tyranno, mirroring the second half of their dynamic with Doc last time. Guess what that means? Top's doing nothing different this movie? Whoa, good guess. At least Petrie's mother has more to say, having that connection with Tyranno, not that she has as big of an impact on events.
I've been putting up with that whiny little voice since we took off. No, no, no! Yep, yep, yep! It's driving me nuts, nuts, nuts!
Few families out there are picturesque. The Land Before Time has established this with none of the main five kids being in a traditional nuclear family. Littlefoot's mother is gone, Sarah's got a single father, Ducky's let her family adopt Spike, and Petrie has not only a missing father figure, but an outcast uncle. Extending these non-traditional norms from focusing around Littlefoot to Petrie was a kind thought on the part of the producers and writer Len Hewley, the sole writer on his sole credit for the franchise. It's novel that it's giving Petrie something to do, but this shouldn't be novel. We're at the 7th movie, and at most, Petrie has been sort of useful to group plans, so I can't blame you if you find this to be too little too late. I don't think The Land Before Time 7 was entirely equipped to tell a story of trauma like Tyranno's, but it's confident. His villain arc is one of desperation, wanting to use the comet's alleged powers to send him to a paradise. But it seems the only paradise he's gonna get is the enlightenment to own up to his past mistakes and suffer proper consequences for them. For anyone who's really into the concept of justice, have I got the movie for you. One change you'll start to notice in the dialogue is the vernacular becoming less human and more mythological. It's always been done in moderation, like them referring to the sun as the bright circle, but around here, they start replacing words they've already used with less common terms, like switching to calling dreams sleep stories. I noticed this here because this movie's subtitle is entirely dedicated to this more mythological wording. If this movie was simply titled The Land Before Time 7, The Comet, there goes some of the character they've been building up. I don't mind the more original terms at this point, but they'll gradually make it just a little harder to immediately understand what they're talking about. Good segue into the songs. Beyond the Mysterious Beyond is this spacey ballad between the Rainbow Faces and Littlefoot as they muse about knowing more. It's a cute and catchy song, but the visuals are funnier than they need to be, with the Blue Fairy's unauthorized cameo and this volcano nobody's scared of. Good Inside is a simple ditty where our heroes discuss how Toronto might not be so bad because everyone acts good and bad. In song. It's a very positive song to the point of being unrealistic. Imagine if they tried to apply it to the average Sharptooth they've encountered. Very Important Creature is the worst of the songs. The lyrics are Toronto bragging and Rinkus and Sierra scheming, which are tolerable. Michael York has talent, even here. But he's directed to keep switching between talking, sing-talking, and singing. It's harmoniously discordant. At least the animation is a notable step up from the past 5 movies. They've switched outsourcing from ACOM to Wang, who allow the animation to retain more squash and stretch and expressiveness. The CGI space shots at the start are now the standard, with this also being the first movie to be entirely coloured with digital ink and paint. It's not a conversion without its errors, and I will miss the richer look of the cel-based first 6 movies, but if they're going to be soft, kiddie, direct-to-video movies, it's appropriate they look the part. It was hard for me to pick a best moment, but I went with saving Ducky from the river. Sure, it's the second time in a day she's separated from the group, but I found this little river rescue to be the most exciting part of the film. The worst part is Toronto yelling out his evil plans to Rinkus and Sierra at night in the middle of plain sight while everyone is sleeping. Is the joke that dinosaurs were really heavy sleepers? How does no one except Ducky hear them until after she gets kidnapped? But between these best and worst moments, The Stone of Cold Fire isn't bringing anything new to the table. We got a Petrie movie with aliens. That should sound cooler in context. I'd call this the second worst so far because it's naturally getting harder for the movies to impress me the longer the series goes on. This is another one. If Len Hewley wrote more Land Before Time movies after this, I wouldn't be able to tell much of a difference. But with the 8th movie, The Big Freeze, we're back in John Loy's more seasoned hands. Maybe this will be cooler more than figuratively.
Look, Mama! Friend!
Why, hello there! I didn't know there were any spike tails around here. How nice!
The story here is that Spike is becoming more of a hassle for Ducky to live with, getting louder and messier to the point that Ducky's getting annoyed. She feels something she's never felt before. Mad. So when a herd of spike tails comes over, Spike gets along with them, but when they have to leave during an extended period of snow in the Great Valley, Ducky gets him to go traveling again with them. But then she regrets doing so, follows the spike tails in secret, and the adventure begins. 41 minutes into the 75-minute movie. The Big Freeze has a lot more setup than usual. If you were the 8th movie in a series, you'd have to work harder to justify your existence too. I'll give it credit for doing things that haven't been done yet, like making it snow in the Great Valley, giving the land a different atmosphere, while elaborating on the through line that the elements seem to really hate this place. But this isn't one of those movies where the world is mightier than the characters, they're still given the focus. New to the spotlight is Mr. Thicknose, who's acting as a sort of history teacher to Littlefoot and his friends now. His fear is that he'll stop looking so smart to others in spite of his secret lack of experience with the outside world. Solid foundation for a character, but it's conveyed more through exposition than anything through most of the movie. Tippy is a young spiketail who Spike forms a bond with when the herd comes over. He's a baby with a limited vocabulary, but you get what he means to Spike. His mother does most of the talking for him, mostly to Ducky and Spike's mother, Mother Swimmer, who I'm just gonna say was not given the attention by the script she required. It's up to her to save Spike's life and show that he belongs to her. So what the movie does is have her save Spike from drowning in the last 2.5 minutes of the movie, after everything else is resolved. It's like they forgot to give her something to do until the last rewrite. At least it's something. I'm happy with this finally being a movie centered around Ducky, as she's always been my favorite of the main 5 and grossly underused in the sequels up to now. And I think this is a believable arc for any sibling to go through. You think you've finally had it up to here with them, but would regret to stop interacting with them. Her and Sarah's voice actresses haven't been replaced since the 5th movie and never will, so even though Aria Curzon and Andy McAfee are sounding older now, At least they're being given the time to get used to the characters and are trying to pitch up their performances to keep them sounding similar to how they're used to. Spike is still mostly non-verbal, but it's a credit to the animators that you can tell what's going on in his head through much of the story. He isn't an independent figure, but that's the point. Littlefoot spent the last movie being motivated to think more about the world outside his bubble. Now he's being told to respect his authority figures even harder. It really is like being in school with him. Lastly, for the main quintet, Petrie freezes. He got his day in the limelight last time. It's okay that he's more of a sidekick here. As for the other grown-ups, they're as frozen as the snow around them. Tops blames Mr. Thicknose for the snowy weather for a second, then Grandpa Longneck talks some sense back into him. That's been their dynamic for years now, and it doesn't seem to be changing.
Wake up! You hear the news?
What?
The Spike Tail's leaving the Great Valley.
Yes!
This is one of the most emotional sequels so far. When the crux is a possible split-up of the core group we've come to know for so long, that is to be expected. It runs the risk of getting mopey, and takes that risk without a second thought. The glass-half-full attitude is they're ready for stories with more poignancy again. Spike leaving is a possibility, and all because Ducky's beginning to learn emotional regulation and has made a mistake. It's not as sophisticated with its feelings as the first or fourth movie, but given the two players in this dynamic are kids, that's understandable. One big change from the norm this movie makes with its adventure is Mr. Thicknose joins Littlefoot, Sarah, and Petrie in saving the others and looking for food. It's refreshing that they're finally going to the mysterious beyond under adult supervision, and it gives them the time to flesh out the theme of respecting educators such as Mr. Thicknose. If they wanted to get a point like this across, they probably should have given him a different name, but regardless, there's also a lesson in here to be honest about your level of wisdom. Mr. Thicknose has put himself on a pedestal and been overblowing his experience, when he's got less experience out in the world than these kids. It's a humbling journey, proving that your age doesn't determine how wise you are. It's a message a Land Before Time sequel can deliver much more clearly and cleanly than what they were doing with Tyranno last year. The trio of songs in The Big Freeze are just as much of a trio of songs as ever. The Mad Song is Sarah's rare time to give one of her friends advice, teaching Ducky how to release anger through rock and roll. It's good, and I giggled at this line.
Pretend that you're a sharp tooth. I could pretend I am your dad.
Holy moly, Ducky! She's gonna need an ice pack for that burn. Family is a soft ballad where Spike's friends and mother discuss what he means to them as he's leaving. These softer ballads are starting to blend together, but this isn't bad, you know what you're getting by now. The Lesson is the worst song this time, with Mr. Threehorn explaining why he was dishonest about his wisdom, but being forgiven by the kids. The instrumental is fine, but the lyrics are such a casual conversation that it doesn't feel like a song. The songs are still a mixed bag, but the animation's reached its final form. It's still the same digital Wang animation, but they're more liberal with the shading and willing to shake the visuals up. I like how they're using colors again. When the snow hits, it gets very cold and muted, but when the characters find the hot spring, the colors warm right back up again. It's a good effect. This is the first movie to have the modern Land Before Time art style, if the first 6 had the classic style, and 7 was a proto-modern style. If I have to watch as the series keeps getting cranked out, at least it looks good enough now to where it's giving the artists and animators plenty of creativity to exercise. The best moment this time is the snowball fight against the Sharptooth in their first of 2 confrontations with one. It goes to show how sanitized the world is now when they're treating Sharpteeth like kids on the playground, but these are Chekhov's snowballs. It's not a bad way to use the Sub-Zero setting in a kids movie. The worst moment is the long, boring school lesson from Mr. Thicknose near the start of the feature. What a lame way to get the plot going, and it doesn't do wonders for the rest of the movie's pacing. Remember, we go adventuring after the halfway point, and Mother Swimmer plays her part in the movie less than 3 minutes before the credits roll. It's not a super well planned out movie, but it was the most emotional and provocative in a while. I'd put it above 7 in my rankings and even above 3, but it's still a mediocre viewing to anyone who's past elementary school or not a diehard fan of The Land Before Time. New millennium, same old dinosaurs doing the same old things. This was the point where there were so many sequels that they stopped putting the installment number on the video covers, lest consumers be overwhelmed by the rising Roman numerals. But the tapes and discs were still selling really well, so like clockwork, another installment landed on shelves a year later. From my personal history, I saw the first one and a handful of moments from the first 7 sequels, but from this point forward, The Land Before Time 9, Journey to Big Water, I'm going in blind.
You like to have fun?
I sure do. Hey! I'll get you.
This time, they're journeying out to sea. Again. This time, instead of being driven out of the Great Valley by locusts, the water comes to them. They've just weathered a flood, and all Littlefoot's friends are too busy dealing with it to play with him. Sarah's gotta help repair her sleeping space, Ducky and Spike are moving, Patrick's gone out to get more giant paper, etc. On his own, Littlefoot discovers a lake created by the flood, and the next day, a lost fish in the lake named Mo. He and his friends have the courage to return Mo to his home in the ocean, or Big Water, but after their folks tell them no, the story gods say and separate them with an earthshake. I'm noticing an emerging pattern, that being more set up to excuse the adventuring. While not as late as last time, the earthshake occurs at the 32-minute mark, nearly halfway through the movie. But even if they adhered more to the 3-act structure with the runtime, this is still a story made of spare parts from previous ones. The kids are physically separated from their parents like the first movie, are going to the big water like the 5th movie, and the elements dictate the plot like the 3rd and 8th movie. It raises the question, how much more can you do with these characters and this setting? This movie seems bent on testing that, as we only get 2 new major characters for this story. Mo is the fresh, utmost marketable character who's cheerful and energetic in spite of his upsetting situation. He's got a good design too. The wilder color scheme helps sell him as part of a different animal group. He kind of mogs this long lady and her hatching babies they meet later in the journey. She's got eggs, but lets the kids rest at her place. Apart from these 2, we've got a new swimming Sharptooth. Same as all the others. Frankly, it blows that we're at the point where a Sharptooth no longer leaves an impression. With the older characters, it's getting hard to give them movie-scale troubles, so they went for smaller ones. Littlefoot feels guilty that he keeps getting his friends involved in these situations. It actually impacts his decisions in a few of the sequels, but it's not made a consistent new facet of his character. Sarah, Ducky, and Spike are merely along for the ride, but Petrie opens up about his imaginary friend he suddenly has now. He started the movie with a cold. Are we sure he isn't still running a fever? Last of all, the grown-ups are in just kind of exist mode today. Telling the kids what not to do and then immediately getting separated feels exactly like the movie itself discarding them from the plot progression.
Oh, when we gonna get there?
This is one of the most formulaic of the movies so far. Reintroduce the characters, set up a conflict, go on an adventure, learn something about friendship or family or community. It's not an awful formula, I want to make that clear. I've seen this done adequately many times already throughout this review, but Journey to Big Water doesn't have enough of its own identity to stick out from the others. Mo is likable, but not to the extent they can bet a movie on him. The earlier movie it kept reminding me of is the 5th one, The Mysterious Island. Odd, since Dev Ross returned as the writer, after it last was the 4th. It's another one that's more adventure-focused than character-focused, and the connection to water and trying to find the ocean helps in this comparison. They don't only travel along water, they sing the big water song from that movie again. It does a few things different, like bring the water to the Great Valley at first, and forcing them to stay near water so they can go with Mo. But all the borrowed elements and the presence of a swimming Sharptooth makes me wish I was watching The Mysterious Island instead. And that's an accomplishment, making me eager to watch a Land Before Time movie that isn't the first. The biggest reason I can glean for this movie being made is as a visual showcase. There's a lot of water in it and it looks pretty nice. It slots right into the early 2000s pop culture trend of showing off pretty water. That could have been a factor in going for an aquatic story this time. Visually, I think this movie is vibrant like the last one. very little kids who've just discovered the color purple should get a stimulating experience from it. It's pretty hard to say anything else nice about how the movie is conveyed without pointing to previous movies doing those things better. Besides the big water reprise, we've got another 3 songs to maybe enjoy. Song of Boredom is a snooze fest. You know what everyone was waiting for? An opening song about how the main characters are tied up in work and not having fun. It's been established at this point in the story, so the song is a waste of time. Imaginary Friend also has little to do with the story, but at least it's more energetic. It's a calypso jam about the benefits of having imaginary friends. Luckily, the ones they come up with don't need chocolate milk. No One Has to Be Alone is yet another fluffy ballad. It hits the same notes as the others, now with a frog at the end. But you listen here in particular and get the feeling Thomas Dekker was getting too old to play Littlefoot. He'd been his singing voice since 5 and regular voice since 6. And I understand why after this, they got a different kid to play him in every movie. Luckily, Littlefoot gets the best moment of the movie, when he has a look underwater at Moe's world. It's more what he's observing than what he's doing, but after the long journey, it's useful that we get to see where Moe comes from and why he wanted to get back. The worst moment is the Song of Boredom, as I've already gone over. It's suitably boring, but to a fault. What you don't want to do with your 9th movie is make your audience, especially your very young audience, any less excited for what's to come. I don't have enough reason to hate this movie, but there's not enough in it for me to ever consider rewatching it in full. Second worst ahead of 6 at the moment. That one had more problems and was duller, but with this one, I was starting to run out of hope for a good Land Before Time sequel. There was a bit more of a marketing push for the next one, the Great Longneck Migration. It was the 10th one, and its release date fell on the 15th anniversary year of the franchise, 2003. If you were a day 1 fan of the first movie, seeing it in theaters in your formative years, you'd be in or around your 20s now. Universal had been making these movies so long that a generation had grown up with them. They'd outlived every other franchise grown out of a Don Bluth production too. The pressure to make this chapter noteworthy must have been immense. It was a long time coming, but they were finally playing the dad card.
You've grown up to be a fine young Longneck, just like I'd hoped you'd be. Your mom would be proud.
She'd be proud of you too.
Littlefoot and the other Longnecks begin having dreams about an eclipse, so they collectively take a pilgrimage across the land to a crater in order to keep the eclipse safe. Everyone turns up, even Bronn, Littlefoot's father. It was a good idea to save this meetup for an anniversary, so the reveal that he's still alive hits harder, and it can be the appropriate time to harken back to the first movie. Instead of losing his mother, Littlefoot has now found his father, and they get to hang out, bond, and take part in some kind of eclipse ritual. It tugs at the heartstrings, gets more epic without getting cartoonish like with the rainbow faces, and has a host of new characters. There's Bronn, of course, Littlefoot's long-lost father, who left his mother to find a peaceful place for both of them to live, but ended up attaining a whole herd to lead. There's some family resemblance between him and Littlefoot, not just in how they look, but how they became the trusted head of their respective groups. We also meet Sue, a much taller Longneck who meets Littlefoot and his grandparents early on in their journey. Her height is useful at points, and she's an early sign they're in good company. When they make it to the crater, Littlefoot meets another Longneck his age, the unfortunately named Shorty. He's an orphan of sorts to Bronn, being one of the first to join his herd, and acts possessive of him when Littlefoot arrives. He's rude and troubled, but not a huge hassle. In fact, I hoped he'd be a little harder for Littlefoot to win over, but the other plot threads have to take priority. Because there's a B-plot of Sarah and co adventuring on their own to catch up with Littlefoot, and they run into this old Longneck named Pat, who's kindly and looks after them for a portion of their adventure. I close my eyes and I can picture him wearing overalls and playing a banjo. The enemies are more plentiful than in a while too. There's a crocodile in a swamp who's trampled by Sue, then tries to trick the others by disguising itself as a rock, but it gets bored waiting for them to debate which rock to step on. Funny, but still foreboding. Then there's a trio of classic T-Rex Sharpteeth who come around near the end. It's not their most threatening appearance, but we get a large battle between them and the heroes that quenches your now naturalized thirst for violence against T-Rexes. Pop culture can normalize anything. The old characters get a lot of use in this movie. Littlefoot develops a more personal connection with his Longneck peers through this pilgrimage, then has a difficult choice to make: stay with his dad or his friends and grandparents. As if he'd really picked the first option, but this was a milestone installment, so you could expect either option your first time. I previously hinted that Sarah, Ducky, Petrie, and Spike all go on their own journey following Littlefoot. With a little difficulty and a little help, they manage to get through all the trials, and it shows not just how much they care about Littlefoot, but how much harder all this is without him. For the first time in ages, Grandma and Grandpa Longneck are a part of the story beyond Grandpa giving Littlefoot advice in a scene or two. They take the journey, hold the eclipse like all the others, and protect Littlefoot when he needs protecting. They're a bit cooler in this movie, and I appreciate that. To celebrate the milestone, a few earlier characters get cameos. Dana and Dinah appear near the start, and Mo turns up in the first musical number. They could have had more cameos, but it's fine. The main characters and newcomers generally got the focus they needed.
Me so tired. We go so far already. That's because we're trying to catch up with Littlefoot?
One way you can tell they'd rewatched the first movie to understand what they're building off of is that the child characters feel a bit ruder again, less clean and innocent than in most of the other sequels. I mean, you've got Shorty, but also Littlefoot tricking Sarah into charging into a rock. He feels bad about it, but this all makes them more childlike, so it's a good thing, allowing them to seem less experienced with the world than all these big old long necks. Another way it harkens back to the original is, of course, by answering the question of where Littlefoot's dad, Bron, is. They kept him somewhat sympathetic, considering what the world was like in the first movie, but directly comparing how things were in the first movie to the 10th, it's shocking how much lighter it is. These tonal and aesthetic changes have been incremental changes across the series, but now when they flash back to Bron and the mother's separation, it has to look apocalyptic. It's a stark reminder of how this used to be purgatory, and now it's a hop and a skip to another gorgeous oasis. It's weird when you take a step back. They keep the tension high with the eclipse, however, and how the Longnecks think they need to prolong it so Doomsday doesn't arrive. Eclipses would naturally be more scary to dinosaurs anyway. They wouldn't know what's happening, they didn't have internet back then. I appreciate how not only is this an adventure Littlefoot is going on with his family once again, but that his friends go on the same adventure, trailing behind. Even though Sarah acts like she's totally not into Littlefoot, as a friend, she's the one most worried about what he's doing without them. When they go off as a quartet, it quickly becomes clear that none of them have the same sense of judgment as Littlefoot, that he adds something to the group. It's selfless of them to go after him, and useful for the story to prove what he means to them in doing so. But after they reunite and Littlefoot takes part in the eclipse ritual, he has to make a choice. Go back to the Great Valley, or stay with his newfound father. A good point is raised that Littlefoot's grandparents need him to look after them, which the fourth movie demonstrated and will only be more true as he and they get older. It's a choice Bron would make for his herd. They make the choice less predictable for a moment with this big goodbye song, but it's still hard to imagine they would have changed the status quo given any chance. If they did, they'd have a Toy Story 4 situation where it would need to be worked around for any more sequels. I can't believe I'm praising The Land Before Time 10 over Toy Story 4, but this is the world we live in. The songs are better on average than usual. Adventuring is about Littlefoot getting himself hyped to go on his own unique adventure. It's bright, exhilarating, backed with well-animated visuals, and it nudges the story forward through its lyrics. Me and My Dad is an easy listening number, again about what Littlefoot's going through, expressing joy in having a father. It's okay, I don't take issue with it being here. Bestest Friends is the annual ballad about Sarah, Ducky, Petrie, and Spike expressing how much they value Littlefoot's friendship in case he leaves. It's the best ballad in a long time, amping up the sentimentality, but it's earned. The credits have a cover called Best of Friends by Olivia Newton-John, probably the biggest star they've gotten for any of these movies, including Diana Ross. I love If We Hold On Together. but Arrival was long overdue. The higher level of ambition in this movie is displayed in the animation bump it got. There's more CGI for props and settings, which can look simple at times, even for 2003, but it gives the world some dimension. This sequence of Littlefoot running up a tree has Disney's Tarzan energy. It goes a little too far when they render the Longnecks in CGI. Up close, it's janky. Far away, it's a good tactic for managing large crowds, but still noticeable. My favourite moments, and yes there are multiple, happen in the dream world. Littlefoot's sleep story at the start of the movie where he and all the Longnecks start floating makes up for the sluggish beginnings of the past few movies. It's different, ethereal, and makes you wonder what could be happening in this movie. Sarah's sleep story is the funniest part of the movie to me. This is what she has nightmares about, Littlefoot being celebrated by everyone in the valley, including her dad. It interrupts 10 movies of gradual character development and hardly lines up with her plan to follow Littlefoot, but it's still a quick, entertaining moment for many reasons. The movie's low point, in my view, is Littlefoot reconciling with Shorty. Shorty runs away in the middle of the night, Littlefoot talks him out of it, then they're suddenly on good terms. His change of heart on Littlefoot happens a little too quickly for it to be fully satisfying. It's a very small complaint in a very long Land Before Time movie. At 84 minutes, the Great Longneck Migration is the longest. The other sequels mostly hover around the 75-minute range, and it earned that extra runtime. I actually like this movie. I think it's good, and an easy watch for anyone of any age. If you think it's even better than the first, I could understand your argument. It may not be a masterpiece, but it is underrated. If this was the last, and Universal decided 10 was a nice round number to end on, it would have been a good way to close the story. But you know what they say in Hollywood, always leave them wanting less. Originally slated for the same old December release in 2004, the 11th movie was delayed a month to January 2005. It wound up being the last movie in the series to get a VHS release, and what a brown note to put at the end of your VHS shelf. The Great Longneck Migration left high expectations for the next sequel, but the Land Before Time 11 Invasion of the Tinysauruses doesn't seem to bother trying to meet them. I've seen some fans who will defend most of the sequels, but have little nice to say about the last 4. Was there any hope for them, or was the franchise out of juice now?
Those bite marks were made by something really small. Even smaller than Littlefoot.
You can rest easy with implications raised by the space intro this time. Psych, the stars are atoms in a cell on a leaf in the Great Valley. The first 10 movies can take place in the Atom universe, the later ones can take place in the Outerverse. There's your excuse to call them non-canon or an alternate timeline. Today, the flowers are blossoming, and everyone's excited to taste some tree sweets from a tree. But Littlefoot tries to eat them before they're fresh and causes them to fall out of the tree, but they're eaten by a kitten-sized species of longnecks. Most of the other valley dwellers think they're pests and want them gone, but Littlefoot is able to befriend them. Apparently, no one has ever noticed the hole they come from before, or noticed any of them sneaking up for food before, day or night. You see, the reason for this is actually pretty clever. Here it is. Maybe a rainbow face experiment went faulty. Oh yeah, they're still hanging out in the background, I don't know why. But the new characters for this movie are mostly bland. Many of them are the smaller breed of longnecks who I'll call Tinysauruses. There's Skitter, the friendly one, Lizzie, the friendly one who has some dad issues, Rocky and Dusty, the friendly twins, and Big Daddy, who you're not gonna believe it, is short. He's got the clearest personality of the lot, being gruff, stern, and untrustworthy of the bigger folk, but it's still not much. The best new character is Tria, an old fling of Topsy's who's come back to the Great Valley and started dating him again. She seems nice, tolerant of Tops's less appealing traits, and like a good influence on Sarah, whose heart is going, not the mama, not the mama. I will make it no secret that I found the B-plot a shade better than the A-plot. There's some sharp teeth again. Littlefoot has to learn to be more honest about making mistakes. He ruins the chances of anyone getting tree sweets this year, but blames the Tinysauruses for eating them all. He had a part to play in them being able to eat them all, but the lesson is conveyed haphazardly, almost like it was tacked on to give him a lesson. But I have issues with how it's conveyed I'll get into later. Sarah is dealing with family issues, coping with a potential stepmother coming into her life. We don't get any insights into what her first mother was like, but doing so would be repeating themes from the last movie. As is, Sarah's being confronted with something that's stressful to any child, but she does work through it by movie's end. I can't say Tops, or Topsy as he likes to be called, is in his best form. The writer's trying to give him more of a heart, but he comes off as a bumbling sitcom dad. It's an effort, if nothing else, to take this character we've known for 17 years and make him less abrasive. Ducky, Petrie, and Spike are like side characters again. They get into hunting the creepy crawlies with the mob, then chastise Littlefoot for not telling the truth. They react to the story without partaking in it, which is one of the smaller disappointments of this movie. Conversely, Grandpa Longneck is the first rational voice in the crowd regarding Tinysauruses. Then he sings to Littlefoot this time instead of lecturing him. Hit or miss, let's just say.
You're not gonna do anything to me.
Oh, what could we do to somebody as big as you?
Yeah, you're gigantic.
There's an adventure here, but it's far more insular than the last three. We only head out of the Great Valley for half a scene. The new location is the Tinysauruses' underground hideout. I guess the budget was lower, which is why we went from the more diverse Longneck designs of yesteryear to all these tiny Littlefoot clones. Big Daddy is the most unique of these guys. That applies to his design and his role in the story. So it's a smaller story than we're used to now, no pun intended, but what makes it extra underwhelming is its third act. All the drama it accentuates is forced. Littlefoot tells the truth of what he did to the tree sweets, and everyone turns on him for a few minutes. That's predictable, but whatever. The Great Valley wanted to get rid of the Tinysauruses for eating the tree sweets. They still did. That information was true. But then they stopped being mad at the Tinysauruses. Sure, they have more context for how they got to the tree sweets, but they still ruined their spring without a second thought. These people can only be mad at one thing at a time, can't they? Petrie says it best.
Me mad, but hard to tell why.
By this point, I'm more invested in Sarah and Tria's relationship. I've never been in Sarah's situation, but it's fair how, like with her friends before her, they're exploring different family dynamics you don't always get in media. It's odd how, because the tone of the series has gotten so soft over the years, maybe finally too soft, that Sarah is now a more developed character than Littlefoot. She's gone from a rude, prejudiced brat to a more emotionally secure kid with more mature challenges. And it looks like Tria's gonna be a good influence on her. Her pride is always gonna be a part of her character, but Sarah's had a lot more to learn than Littlefoot, as a result of how long they've had to keep telling stories with them. Song time! Most of them are lame here. Creepy Crawlies is about Tops leading a charge against the Tinysauruses. It has bad lyrics, tired performances, and is forgettable compared to the first reprise. They give it 2 reprises. The first one has more impact. Seeing Ducky and Petrie sing such a song is an effective show of how strong mob mentality can be. The second one is the credits song, a counterpart for the Tinysauruses to sing called Stupid Stompers. I don't know why this is the song the producers wanted to push so hard. Girls and Dads is better, a doo-wop number with Sarah and Lizzie bonding over only having dads. It's got a good melody and adds to the better story. But then If Only is the annual ballad between Littlefoot and Grandpa Longneck. It's just one of their conversations but in song form because they needed to put a third song in the movie. Good moments in this movie are sparse, but I would pick Tria protecting Sarah from the sharp teeth. She's proven to be a good friend to her, but this clinches that she can be a good mother to her. There's a few worst moments. Littlefoot seeing Tinysauruses for a second time and that scaring him, as if he hasn't seen them before. Just a confusing way to add suspense. Then how they're treated by the crowd after Littlefoot tells the truth, with ambivalence. Better than wanting to wipe them out, but there's a huge 180 being made here. They still ate the tree sweets, and that's what they were mad about. These low points make the movie seem more dramatic than it is, when really, it's compensating for how boring the story actually is. It's another extended TV show episode like 6, but with less stakes, which is why I'd say this is the worst one yet. We had to make another one this year, Energy. And I don't blame the people who made it, just Universal for not giving them the time after the Great Longneck migration to make a worthy addition. Unluckily, Universal made them make more Land Before Time over the next 3 years, 2 more sequels and a TV show. The show was announced later in 2005, which could have factored into the longer gap between 11 and 12, just over 2 years between home media releases. There was allegedly a TV premiere for The Land Before Time 12, The Great Day of the Flyers, on December 6, 2006, but I haven't found any evidence it aired on North American TV before the date of its DVD release, February 27, 2007. Even the February 25th air date on Cartoon Network doesn't seem to be validated by any contemporary or retrospective sources. I am not okay with widespread misinformation about a Land Before Time sequel I don't like.
Me can do anything. Me can do anything. Me can do anything.
That's right.
Except fly through sky puffies.
For the second time ever, we've got a movie centered on Petrie and his family. He and all his one-dimensional siblings have to pass this flyer rite of passage called the Day of the Flyers, but Petrie has difficulty flying in a group formation. At the same time, this feathered fellow named Guido finds himself in the Great Valley. He doesn't know what species he is or anything about his family, but he becomes Petrie's flying coach for a little while. At the same time, Tops and Tria have produced an egg, so they have less time for Sarah, especially when it hatches. There's similarities in the story structure to the last movie. A lower stakes conundrum makes up the A plot, and Sarah family troubles take up the B plot. I know what you're thinking, and yes, that asteroid is way behind schedule, but more important to the matter, the structure didn't lead to high quality results last time. It didn't this time either. As far as new characters are concerned, Guido is a microraptor who sounds and acts neurotic. He coaches Petrie for a bit, but becomes more of a hassle to the group than necessary as the movie goes on. Guido is technically a sharp-tooth, because scientists have since found more proof that microraptors are carnivores, so the group is becoming more tolerant of more sharp teeth as long as they can develop empathy like Chomper and Guido. Sarah's new little sister Trisha is a baby, and has the personality of one. That is to say, almost nothing. She's just here to teach Sarah a lesson about little siblings. It seems they wanted to add baby three horns in every 6th movie, so part of me wonders what The Land Before Time 18 would have been about. Sharptooth. The old characters have some things to do, but not all significant to the story. Petrie has to get better at flying. He kinda does. Good for him. Petrie's mother doesn't do much except say supportive things to him about 3 times. Not a bad role, but not a good one either. We don't learn much about his siblings, even though we've seen them for a dozen blimmin' movies now. It's never too late to give a group of young flyers individual personalities, or even gimmicks, but John Loy seems to think it is. Sarah feels left out of the Tria-Sarah-Tops family dynamic now that her parents are putting all their time into raising Trisha. Her arc here is like a mishmash of the 6th and 11th movies, which reads as the storytellers spinning their wheels. You could infer that Tops is continuing to get less aggressive around Tria. She knows how to turn a bad boy good. He's still stern and proud to a fault, but he's got more in life to genuinely love. It's a strange but welcome change. For the first time, Littlefoot isn't too important to the events. He gets one of his usual talks with Grandpa Longneck about the Day of the Flyers, but is otherwise in the same camp Ducky and Spike are usually in, hanging around because they're friends.
Well, at the end of my tale, I got a bopper. You got a bopper?
Maybe. What is a bopper?
The Great Day of the Flyers' biggest problem is that it's a really boring premise for a movie. I'm sure most can relate to the pressure of cooperating in a group project or passing a test of any sort, but compared to everything we've seen before, it's not a conflict worthy of much significance in this world. A B-plot maybe, but not the crux, not what everyone's focused on this time. They find a really lame excuse to get the group out into the mysterious beyond, having Guido sleepwalk there. And then you get some Sharptooth shenanigans that constitute the only moment to resemble anything you'd want in a Land Before Time movie at all. If you find anything in this movie, including this, to be moving or frightening or have left a big impact on you, that's your valid experience, but prepare for people to send you the SpongeBob roller coaster meme. You've still got Sarah's family matters to attend to, and even though they aren't as interesting as last time, it's still continuing a plot thread, making it feel like a sequel does something. It could be because I've seen so many cartoons about looking after babies now, but this doesn't do any fresh jokes or beats with the premise. Even if this was your first time watching one of these plots, I'm not sure it would be as engaging as even the Dana and Dinah stuff last time. That was more annoying, but this is more boring, which in my opinion is less forgivable. It's a below average script with a below average selection of songs. One of a Kind is sleepy and generic for a first song. Petrie and Guido don't have pretty singing voices, so hearing them get solos leaves a sour impact. I know Jeff Bennett and Rob Paulsen can sing, but not as these characters for extended periods. Things change as Sarah's sad song about missing getting the most attention from Tops and Tria. Littlefoot and Ducky convince her it can work out, another conversation in song form. Flip Flap and Fly is the best song of the movie, a lively gospel song with another Mo cameo and some stimulating visuals. The message for this one is to be an individual and stand out from the system. Petrie wins everyone over with the message quite easily, but yeah, it's a catchy song. You'll notice that this is the second movie after the original to be produced in widescreen, presumably in high definition too, but it wasn't released in that quality originally because Blu-ray and Red Blu-ray hadn't penetrated much of the home media market in early 2007. The problem with this is it makes the roughness, the home video quality, and the occasional mistake in the film's animation more noticeable. The curtain's peeled back a little bit. It doesn't feel like it needs to be in a more cinematic aspect ratio, especially not with this story. My favorite moment of this movie is Flip Flap and Fly. I mentioned it's catchy and appealing as can be, but another good thing about getting to it is it means the movie's almost over. The worst part is Guido sleepwalking for 10 minutes. I timed it. It's over 600 seconds of padding, 1/8 of the movie, and all it does is get them all out of the Great Valley and reveal Guido can fly. These could both be shown in under a minute. You could have shortened this dramatically, and this movie would have still been longer than the first one, which, may I remind you, I complimented for its brevity. But isn't it a perfect encapsulation of what the Great Day of the Flyers is? It's sleepwalking, the most disposable entry yet. It ended up being Charles Grosvenor's last directorial effort for the franchise. Whether that's fitting is up for you to decide, since his contributions were more mixed in quality than ever. He'll stay on to produce and co-direct the 13th, which... Say, do you want to hear me review the TV series? I'm in the mood for stalling.
To the land before time, before time.
To wrap up the longest history section I'll ever make for a video, while Judy Freudberg, Tony Geist, and Charles Grosvenor are credited as the creators, development into a TV show is credited to Ford Riley, a Disney television animation writer who's contributed to a few shows I've reviewed already, such as Recess and Nickelodeon's Chalk Zone. He had later come to create Special Agent Oso and The Lion Guard for a preschool audience, but before then, this was the show he'd had the most responsibility over. It was Amblin's first on-screen credit in the franchise since the very first movie, but I don't think this was for much except character co-ownership. Premiering in Canada on January 5th, 2007, then in the US on Cartoon Network 6 days after The Great Day of the Flyers in March, The Land Before Time, the series, seemed to come and go with just one batch of 26 half-hour episodes. Like the 12th movie, US premiere dates for a few of the TV show episodes have unreliable sources, but it's assumed to have finished airing there in early 2008, a casualty of the dinosaur recession. Nothing's pointing to this being a show with a super strong impact, but I might like at least 3 episodes.
Oh, I'm glad it's you, and not the you I thought was you.
The story is the same as ever. Littlefoot, Sarah, Ducky, Petrie, and Spike all enjoying themselves in the Great Valley and going on adventures. Now they're joined by Chomper and this new fast runner named Ruby. It's nice to see Chomper again, but we never get to see how he or Ruby wound up as permanent members of the group. We know how they met up and had to move to the Great Valley, but the first episode treats them like they've been part of their regular routine for some time already. I don't think they needed to make an episode to introduce them. Anyone can infer that Chomper's moved in and brought a friend. In regards to how Chomper's characterized, he's depicted as a little older than in his last appearance, more aware of how he sticks out, but he's still very friendly and doesn't let his instincts get the best of him. It's good to see that he's continued down the right path. We hear little of his parents though. I hope they're accepting of his lifestyle. Now Ruby is a fine addition, the definition of a supporting character. She supports other characters' stories, has a few of her own, and some quirks to make her dialogue more colourful. She'll be redundant and spout malpropisms. Not bad for what's very hard to make completely natural, a new character in a TV show. I imagine an executive said, "You need to add a new character." Ford Riley came back the next day with Ruby and the executive said, "I was joking. We only say that as a joke. You actually fell for that?" The reason these two are separated from their folks is Redclaw, apparently the meanest Sharptooth of them all. One of the most prolific too, appearing in 7 episodes. He's one of the most intimidating in a while in design alone, but I'm familiar with his game. He's just okay. There's a few one-off characters, and they aren't all dinosaurs. They experiment with other prehistoric creatures and concepts, like with Skip, an early mammal who knows his way around the mysterious beyond. Milo, Lydia, and Prowler, horned gophers who worship Spike because who wouldn't? Scuttle, a needy crab who takes advantage of the dinosaurs' hospitality. And the Hidden Runner, a legendary creature noted for its excellence at camouflage. He might be a dinosaur, he might be something more. I don't usually do this, get around to the main characters this late into a character rundown, but I think you can guess how they're depicted in any spin-off media doesn't contradict the film series. If it did, someone would raise hell. Littlefoot is still the leader, still curious and inquisitive about any situation. He passes his own rite of passage with the Longnecks, which is nice, but controlling an eclipse should have been the rite of passage. Sarah's still her more settled down self from the more recent movies. Because the stories are smaller, so are her gripes. What we know about Ducky isn't often questioned, but when it is, it's the riskiest the show gets with any of the main characters, and I admire the gumption. Petrie has the same kinds of insecurities as explored in the last movie. They give him a few stories, but not many. And Spike has a few episodes to shine. I think the smaller scope of these stories brings out the best of him and how he can be used. With the other familiar faces, I might be tired from explaining what they do upwards of a dozen times, but for those who've jumped to the TV show section, let me catch you up to speed. Grandma and Grandpa Longneck are Littlefoot's grandparents who he lives with. Grandpa usually gives Littlefoot advice and wisdom, but they're old, so don't expect them to be active all the time. Tops is Sarah's brash, closed-minded dad, but he's settled down with an old friend, Tria, who's more open-minded, and they have a daughter named Trisha, who Sarah has to babysit sometimes. These family members don't feel as prevalent in the show as the movies, but I think that's because with the sequels, they had to keep re-establishing who these characters are, while in the show, they trust you can understand their roles after seeing enough episodes in any order. Some one-off characters from the movies return for one-off TV appearances. Bron returns, it wouldn't be right if he didn't, to really test Littlefoot's intuition. Doc returns, but it doesn't seem like he's fun at Thanksgiving. Mo returns, coincidentally in an adventure with another Earthshake. This can't be a coincidence. The bully dinos from the third movie return, with more humility, but they feel like a deep cut this far into the series. Ellie returns, but with a brash friend who takes more of a role in the story she returns for. I could keep going, but to avoid redundancy, let's get into the writing for a 97th time.
Thank you, Chomper, thank you.
No prob.
One of my complaints about some of the sequels is that they're akin to TV episodes stretched out to an hour and a bit. Universal must have been getting that complaint a lot, because the story structure for the show isn't any different. The plots will vary in scale and stakes, but they tend to wrap up fine in 22 minutes. No A or B segments, no multi-parters, no fancy pants gimmicks. Every episode is a half hour in the Great Valley or its immediate parameters. Going out to an entirely different location like big water or a crater isn't a life-threatening experience anymore, but it is considered too movie-worthy to do on the show with any frequency. Episodes that stay within the Great Valley actually end up feeling novel. Every movie's gone out into the mysterious beyond for at least a scene, so the kids finally realizing they could get killed out there at any moment and making the best of things at home is startling. I don't know how many fans would be disappointed by the rarer journeys outward, but this lets the Great Valley be fleshed out as a world of its own. You got the sense in the sequels, especially the early ones, that it's a nice place to live, but kind of suffocating if you're restless for something else, like Dunedin. But now, it seems if you're lucky enough, you'll find some amazing or unsavory things about the place you live that you never would have guessed would impact your opinion on the place, like Dunedin. As you would have picked up on with the returning characters, continuity to the movies is something the show embraces. They'll remember events from the movies, reprise musical numbers from them, and reunite with friends. If you ever felt any of those interactions were unsatisfying or were itching to see more of them, the show will usually have you covered. There's a fan-pleasing amount of follow-through here. If you've watched all 12 movies preceding it, you'll either be giddy or readily accepting the benefits of your investment. Guess how I felt. Keeping up tradition, the show has 2 songs in each episode. You are not getting me to describe all 52 songs, but I'll provide my overall opinion on them. They're as okay as ever. Usually easy to get through, but you'll be hearing some of the same melodies over and over again with the lyrics altered. There's a song in episode 5, The Great Log Running Game, that has a really unique rock instrumental.
Well, it's not fair. Tried to prove my dad right. He doesn't care.
But they resort to repeating it 6 times. You might take issue with them reusing songs from the movies, like reprising Big Water once and Adventuring 7 times. I'll admit that's a few too many times, but I think it's charming how they picked some of their most iconic songs for airplay. The animation is the same wang work you've been seeing since 7. Being done in widescreen and HD, it shouldn't look too different from 12 from a distance, but it's on a TV budget, in addition to the ceiling that is the shorter turnaround time episodic TV production tends to have over any kind of movie. The 2000s were a time when the most acclaimed animated kids shows had bold, solid designs and heavily stylized worlds influenced by retro aesthetics. The Land Before Time, the series, stuck out when it aired, looking like a fantasy movie in the Disney tradition, with the bloom cranked to the max on character designs that weren't made with the TV production pipeline in mind. Sure, Disney had been making TV tie-ins to their film canon, but there was only one left in 2007. You look at the animation alone and think The Land Before Time could have and should have received its TV tie-in way earlier. Since there's only one 26-episode run of episodes, I can't point out seasonal trends, so onto the best and worst lists. If one list skews earlier or later in the packaging order, I'll chalk it up to coincidence. Starting with the third best, Search for the Sky Color Stones is one of their riskier ideas, Ducky going bad. They're looking for colourful crystals and she turns into a greedy hoarder. But I like that they made her less innocent and more flawed, and it's all because of shiny, colourful things. Any kid could have done the same. Through the Eyes of a Spike Tale is one of Spike's biggest roles in the franchise. We hear what he thinks, and see how he sees the others, just as incoherently as he's usually depicted. It reminds me of that King of the Hill joke where, in Boomhauer's recollection, he's the one who speaks normally. And then it hit me. Spike is the Boomhauer of the group. Granted, Spike had been in 4 movies before King of the Hill premiered, so it's more fair to say Boomhauer is the Spike of his group. My favourite episode is The Hidden Canyon. The group stumble upon a lovely area full of tasty plants, but then learn that the plants are there to keep sharp teeth away. Whoops. For most other shows, that would be a sarcastic whoops, but read the room. This is a show aimed at a very young audience who'll eventually need to comprehend why their lives are full of safety nets. And if those safety nets are edible, don't eat them. There's layers to what the story is teaching, and that's just one layer. As for episodes I consider the worst, The Lonely Journey sees Chomper dealing with being the only friendly Sharptooth living in the valley, by going out of the valley trying to find Sharpteeth to befriend. It's a foregone conclusion that he's not going to succeed. He's different, he was imprinted by leaf eaters when he hatched, so there's little point to doing this other than to make Chomper feel more lonely. The Meadow of Jumping Waters is a retread of some themes already explored in the 6th movie. They're going on a trip to see some geysers, but because Spike ate the wrong tree stars, Petrie is paranoid about bad luck the whole trip. You can do more than one story about luck, but besides the geysers, there's not much going on here you haven't seen elsewhere in the series. The forbidden friendship is the very worst. What should be the big return of Tippy to Spike's life becomes a lame, tropey, parents fight so they don't let their children play episode. With how the grown-ups behave in this world, this was bound to happen, but this is always a very forced conflict. This is one of Topps' most confrontational roles in some time. Even when Spike and Tippy break the rules and find food, which this is all about, he's hesitant to share with the Spiketail herd. All the other episodes have more natural and justifiable conflicts than this. If you wanted to know my verdict on the show as a whole, and where I'd put it in the film ranking, somewhere between 3 and 6. You'll have to look out for some bad episodes, but as a whole, the show is harmless. Like most of the sequels, don't expect much for a wider range of age demographics than preschoolers. Airing on Cartoon Network in 2007 and early 2008 doesn't help in this matter. A shaky time behind the scenes for sure, but all the Cartoon Network originals from this time that I've reviewed are better than this. Yes, I know I'm not a Foster's guy, but it's got more spunk than this. When I get to the end of a show review, I feel like I've done my duty on the internet, so I bid you farewell and hope to see you— oh god, I almost forgot about you two. There was another Land Before Time movie released in 2007 during the broadcast of the TV show. It's set before the show chronologically, but was released after its American premiere on November 27th, 2007, which is why I've put it at this point in the video. Unlucky 13 here, The Wisdom of Friends, was Charles Grosvenor's last one as producer, and John Loy's last one as writer. Charles is just the co-director now, behind newcomer Jamie Mitchell. He'd worked as a director on various Disney and Nickelodeon productions, as well as Universal's latest theatrical animated film, 2006's Curious George. This is not a promotion or a demotion, it's purgatory. You'll see some fans enjoy and defend as much of the series as they can, but The Wisdom of Friends is largely considered the worst. I'm in too deep to back out now. What do I look like, a yellow belly?
We look like that?
The story is that Littlefoot almost gets himself and Grandma Longneck hurt one day, and so he values the gaining of wisdom a little more. The day after, he and his friends meet some yellow bellies who've gotten lost on their way to Berry Valley. Because they don't appear to be the brightest bulbs, Littlefoot takes it upon himself to guide them through their journey there with his own wisdom, venturing out into the mysterious beyond again, you get the picture. We've been there, and we've done that. The mysterious beyond has lost nearly all its excitement from repeated visit. This bites because the mysterious beyond is nearly the whole world. There's still loads of storytelling possibilities out there, but all too often, we're in rocky plains with barely anything to see and do except run away from Sharpteeth. This used to be the most desolate place, but now it's just down the street. What's worse is this time, they're down the street with the yellow bellies. But I'll get to them when I get to them. I'm starting with the old characters first. Littlefoot is playing babysitters to these new creatures. He's on a wisdom kick after his annual chat with one of his grandparents, eager to share it with the yellow bellies if it means they have a better chance of surviving their trip. His use to the story is, for the first time, debatable, as will be revealed across its runtime. Sarah might not have as much wisdom, but she has common sense, pressuring Littlefoot to leave them from time to time, assuming they're fine. I guess the storytellers wanted you to be at odds with her in these instances, but I'm not for a second. Ducky and Petrie get farted on by a yellow belly. It's not funny. Spike doesn't do much except hang out with the group and the yellow bellies. He seems to be on both wavelengths at once. Glad someone's having a good time in this movie. I'll note that Grandma Longneck is given priority in the story over Grandpa Longneck for the first time in 9 movies. That's a change, but she doesn't do anything different for it than her husband usually would. The other grown-ups have very minor and/or silent roles as the grown-ups. We hear through the kids that they're always imparting wisdom, lessons, advice, and the occasional stern lecture, but it's told instead of shown for most of them. The infamous yellow bellies, who are anything but cowardly, resemble dodos, which are birds that are famous for how extinct they are. They lack readable survival instincts, appearing to be stupid and foolish. But that's because they are stupid and foolish. We're supposed to come to the conclusion they'll be fine on their own, but to what extent? Consider who they resemble. As a group, they're a handful. As individuals, only 3 stick out. The blue one, Lufa, has a very naughty man for a voice actor. The pink one, Doofa, has a voice actress who had a one-off role in Phineas and Ferb a few months later. That's all I care about. The green one, Phoebe, is the best yellow belly because he's mute, not for his character, that he's wiser than he lets on. Hey look, there's sharp teeth. Hey look, they're easily defeated by these feathered sheep. This is their most pathetic set of defeats yet.
We play and jump and get swept away. It's fun.
I think pretending to be in trouble is against the wisdoms.
A couple movies back, I noted that the vernacular in this world has been drifting into a more mythological form, but here, with the word for wisdom being referred to as wisdoms, they have taken it way too far. I can't take this seriously, they sound like meme cats. I've been tolerant of the drift, but it's getting to be patronizing. The script treats you as though you don't have a solid grasp on the English language, and if you do, it's punishing you by being deliberately infantile. That irks me as an adult viewer, but something I could see being frustrating for anybody is just how clownish the yellow bellies are. They aren't in the whole movie, just an hour of it. The group we've come to know over 13 movies has to now deal with a new species that doesn't seem to know what it's doing. Kids are going to identify more with them than the new species, and will feel bad for them that this is such a stressful adventure for them. Littlefoot repeatedly tries to impart the most basic wisdom to the yellow bellies, but they keep ignoring it. It's a formula that the movie finds funny. Well, who's laughing now? You, at my expense. And while a story doesn't need a clearly spelled out message to mean something, the wisdom of Friends saves the hassle by not having a clearly spelled out message at all. The message seems to be clear as day at first, that everyone figures things out in their own way. It's all but said out loud by the halfway point, but it does a bad job conveying this message, constantly getting the yellow bellies into trouble of their own making, and having them survive by the smallest of margins. Ironically, as Littlefoot is learning they should trust their instincts, you'll be trusting their instincts less. What's worse is all this bumbling around doesn't really matter. Because of the cartoon luck they keep getting rescued by, you get the sense the yellow bellies would have gotten to their destination without Littlefoot and friends. A bit slower, but still. So is Littlefoot and the gang's part to play in their journey all for nothing? Possibly. The whole joke this movie leads to is when they get back and get the ultimate wisdom, never leave the Great Valley. It's kinda sad that the last minute treats the whole preceding movie as build up to a punchline, but fitting considering how much of a joke its presentation is. The worse the movie, the more I dread the songs, but they aren't as bad as the rest of the movie. Still not good though. Say So is a pop track where the five are talking about the wisdoms, say-sos, and gotta-dos their folks give them. The music is catchy, but the lyrics are too juvenile and run into the increasing problem that they're just casual conversations in music form. Yellow Belly Bounce is a basic dance number with the Yellow Bellies. Not much to the lyrics, but that works to its advantage. It spells out that the Yellow Bellies have their own kind of wisdom they can survive with. There's 30 minutes to go for them to test that. And lastly, How Do You Know is the ballad, right on cue. It's fine, not the weakest ballad, but it's down there. If I had to pick a best moment from the movie, it wouldn't be any of the songs, but rather the demonstration of survival instincts at the start, while the narration is still going. It gets the point across much better than the rest of the movie. And yes, the worst part of the first movie now looks subtle compared to the best part of this movie, but small victories. The worst scenes are anything when they're laying on hard how tough the yellow belly herd is to be around, especially when they're sleeping, eating, or huddling from the rain. A dishonourable mention is Ducky almost walking off a cliff, harkening back to the good old days. I hope I've made a case for why this is the worst movie of the series. It's really bad, a whole lot worse than 11 and 12. 13 strikes me as completely uninterested in its own story and themes, unwilling to explore them at any level to justify its own existence. It appeared in stores, it got $15 out of parents, it did its job. There was thousands of man-hours of time and effort put into this one, like all the others, but I sense very little passion. It's understandable that for a long time, this was it. The sequels weren't generating any buzz anymore. The show was this little one-off experiment, and key figures who were still working on the series were ready to move on. This is why it is so hard to figure out exactly why a 14th movie hit the shelves on February 2nd, 2016. 9 years later, 8 years after the show had ended, this dormant franchise just had another jolt of life, in a time where the direct-to-video movie market was a ghost town. If there's one clear message to the Land Before Time 14 Journey of the Brave, it's to never underestimate the butterfly effect. The new director for this movie is Davis Doi, who's had a pretty long, illustrious career in animation, with work ranging from Ralph Bakshi's Lord of the Rings to Care Bear's Oopsie Does It. This is the latest movie he's directed. The writing duo, Elena Lesser and Cliff Ruby, have written the screenplays for Bolto and Cats Don't Dance. They aren't the best in town, but I could partake in a trust exercise with them. Any connection to the original Don Bluth, Judy Freudberg, and Tony Geist team has long since disappeared. Same with the Royale and Smith era too. Even the Universal cartoon plane had long since retired. I hear he got married to the R. So what do Davis, Elena, and Cliff have for us?
Littlefoot need us.
It's too dangerous. I can't let you come.
After a recap of Littlefoot's family situation, we're shown the one day a year where Bronze Herd comes to visit the Great Valley. Littlefoot's excited, but when the herd shows up, they reveal Bron's been left behind in a volcanic eruption at a distant volcano, or fire mountain if you prefer. So Littlefoot decides to venture out to find him by himself. The others follow him because force of habit. Before you know it, you're watching a Land Before Time sequel. The focus of the story this time is on the why. Why do they keep going out into the world when it's so risky? Littlefoot's going to save a family member, but the others aren't as enthusiastic to go as him, just going because they don't want him to be out on his own. It's routine, and so are the character arcs. Littlefoot has to learn to miss his friends when he goes off on his own. We already did something like that all the way back in the first movie, with a handful of lapses for different reasons, but having him lapse again this far into the series feels so forced. Sarah is getting stronger, headbutting bigger rocks. Her part to play in saving the day involves headbutting her biggest rock ever. Other than that, we briefly retread the 10th movie with her struggling to lead in Littlefoot's absence. Ducky and Spike have new swimmer siblings hatching today. Do they add to the story? No. Were they an attempt at a sequel hook? I'm not certain, but I have a hunch. Petrie's role in the movie is also arbitrary. He gets separated from the group too, and becomes a leader himself to these little green guys. This only lasts 2 scenes and is played more comedically than anything. No lesson for Petrie to develop his own leadership skills, it's just a gag. Being set after the TV show, Chomper and Ruby are living in the Great Valley now. They don't join the Classic 5, but they follow them out of the valley, right behind the parents, and they're alright. Chomper's sniffer has some uses, Ruby's here for funsies. But that's something else that's different from the norm. After waiting for a day, the grown-ups are willing to leave for the mysterious beyond and rescue their kids. It's not as though they've never tried, but seeing them go this far, all the way to the same fire mountain Littlefoot's headed towards, shows that Littlefoot's a bit of a trendsetter. Despite the hopes set up at the start of the movie, we don't get much of Bron, but he does save Littlefoot's life after having his life saved, so still a good dad. New characters are as odd a bunch as ever. You've got Wild Arms, a new addition to Bron's herd who's a bit of a wimp. He's supposed to be comic relief, but he doesn't do much except panic. I don't like him. What's he doing on the cover anyway? He's not in this scene. You don't deserve this, Wild Arms. Etta is a big beak who Littlefoot meets in a cave and has to cheer him up at his lowest point. She has some corny jokes to her name, but does more for the story and gets a song number of her own. Not bad, but not among the best one-offs. One last time, there are some sharp teeth. They're designed with feathers and horns now, keeping up with newer scientific discoveries. It signifies how long this franchise has been around, and that dinosaurs the general public couldn't have recognized in the 80s and 90s are now being used. You could see it as scraping the bottom of the barrel, but I see it as running out of ideas. There's a few groups of little green dinosaurs, Ducky and Spike's new siblings that don't do anything, and the guys who worship Petrie for getting them food. The connection is surface level, but I thought I'd point it out.
I had a sister once used to say, just when things get darkest, that's when you look for the light. Unless, of course, it's too dark to find it.
As the first movie in the series in nearly a decade, I guess it was fitting they break down what drives Littlefoot and his friends to keep going on these adventures. For Littlefoot, it's a special case, since his father's in danger. For his friends, it's the fact they've always done their best to stick together, ever since they first made it to the Great Valley. But there are times where they're implying Littlefoot is the only one left who's still fully invested in these trips, and willing to go the distance. I wonder if this could be a projection of the crew's own concerns over how long the series has been repeating its own plot beats. Like the freshness, the darkness of the story is left a long time ago. It doesn't feel like there's any threat left in the world, with how often and easily the sharp teeth have been getting thwarted by these kids, and how the mysterious beyond keeps handing the heroes trees and stinkweed and pools and rivers they can use to traverse. The only way you could tell it's still a dangerous place is with this one sandstorm these kids are able to survive and some corpses dotted around. Those skeletons sure are scary.
Rattle me bones!
I suppose something they really wanted to stick with longtime fans was Littlefoot and Sarah splitting at the halfway point. They can't expect us to believe they're not friends anymore. Littlefoot's too empathetic, and Sarah's long since managed her prejudice towards Longnecks. This is a temporary fork in the road that they both come to regret after a few minutes. This was the first movie in a while, and is still the last, so could it be impactful as a piece of drama between them? Not really, considering the temporary nature of their feelings, like I said. E for effort, but no one should be expecting this to be as big a deal as it first appears. I wasn't expecting this movie to have 4 songs instead of the usual 3. That gives me more music to review, and I frankly don't think I'm very good at reviewing music. Today's the Day is a chipper song performed by our Classic 5 regulars about looking forward to something exciting. A good fit for the first scenes we're seeing them together in for 8 years. Hot and Stinky is all about stinkweed. At first about how bad the stuff is, but then how it can be a good repellent against sharp teeth. I hate that it's kind of catchy. Who Needs Friends is the weak link of this movie, a duet between Littlefoot and Sarah after their tiff, and until the end, it's not as downbeat in composition or performance as they needed it to be. Last of all, after about 45 songs recorded across 28 years, there's Look for the Light, Etta's gospel number that allows her guest voice, Reba McEntire, to show off. It has vaguely religious undertones with what the light could be interpreted as, but more literally, it's showing that caves are beautiful. I'll take her word for it. For this movie only, the animation was outsourced to BV Brilliant and Tycoon Animation Studios. I don't know enough about these studios to notice which individual scenes they each did, but as a whole, it's average. A little more on model than the original movie and Wang Productions, but not as stiff as the ACOM movies. The environments are brighter and more detailed than ever before, being made with HD displays in mind, since movies could be purchased digitally now. So it's a step back with the character animation, and the environment looks less like the first movie than ever. Can you tell I'm missing it? The positive takeaway is it was nice to get a new 2D animated movie in 2016, even if it's this. One more round of best and worst moments, then I can get on with the eulogy. My favourite moment from The Land Before Time 14 is saving Bronn. Everyone there helps out, doing it together as a team, which strengthens the lesson Littlefoot has had to learn again. And then Bronn saves Littlefoot, tying a nice bow on this action sequence. The worst moment is when they make it to a pool, and despite being covered in stinkweed to repel sharp teeth, they get in the water and clean themselves off, having a laugh while doing so. Everyone except Littlefoot, so he can appear more responsible. For the rest of them, it's a complete lapse in their survival instincts, and it's a wonder they survived this far into the series when you watch it. This was a hard one to rank, but I'll put it between 6 and 11. If it was made way earlier, I would probably like it over 6, but the longer these went on, the less it was about if they were good movies in their own right, most of them weren't, and more if they had a reason to exist. And that's a factor that's dragged down the last 4 movies. They symbolized a franchise that had long since made its mark and no longer received any of the respect it had when it started. I'm not going to say The Land Before Time is the long-running animated franchise that's had the biggest drop in quality, but The Land Before Time has always been the first example my mind goes to of a franchise that's run too long. And there are consequences. Key figures in the franchise's creation leave for new projects or retirement. The remaining crew members have a harder time coming up with new ideas. The audience gets used to the patterns between installments. The audience gets restless and demands change. More radical ideas are implemented to polarizing reactions. The franchise keeps going despite the waning critical reception. And then it stops one day. They're all going to stop one day. Or take on a different form like a spin-off or reboot. And how will the franchise be remembered by history? It depends on how long it ran for and how many changes it went through. And The Land Before Time only has 1 movie out of 14 that's generally considered great. I'll give the 10th one some credit too, but that's still a small fraction of a big, long set of animated material that they know a lot of fans are going to give a shot because the cast they love is in them. It's a testament to Don, Judy, Tony, George, Steve, all these people, that The Land Before Time resonated this much that people, for decades, still wanted to see these characters, make sure they were okay. As I walk away from this franchise, I feel like I've seen everything these characters are capable of doing. I was happy to leave it at 10, and that you could say was overkill. Nevertheless, I don't think Universal should make a new movie or show or spin-off or reboot without seriously considering the franchise's value. Not as high as when it began. There are still ways for new generations to get to know Littlefoot and his friends, but it will take a lot of development and probably a fresh new image. These are great characters, but they ought to be more creative with them if they're this established. The original continuity has been completely told. I could have taken the narrator's word that they would be alright, but I just had to be sure.
Garfield and friends will be right back. At least I'll be.